Maybe. We'll see.
We'll let you know a little bit.
Okay. We'll get started in about 1 minute.
Hey, Mary.
Good.
The pig valve.
I knew there was something that I couldn't recall.
I think it's calm. I found out how to do it.
Could be, I
I
can text him to make a clarification.
Just what he had. Maybe.
I was thinking last time, where did this, it's like a deja vu from something, but it wasn't positive.
He just turned,
My cardiologist said.
I
Unbelievable.
think 81, so I think he's doing pretty
You know,
good.
Father Al at Our Lady of Peace just turned 95 a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
95 years old.
Mike, well,
That
you're
clean
92
living
now,
will
aren't
make
you?
you last a long time, like the nuns.
You're 92, right, Mike?
59, 60. That was the minute.
91?
Sure.
Might look good for him.
Yeah, you look good for 91.
You guys all ready? Take your last swig. I all good? Okay.
Waiting on you.
Okay, we're going to get started. Good evening. I am Mary Sullivan, City of Darien Alderperson for Ward 5. I serve as chairperson of the Administrative Finance Committee. I would like to call to order our Committee of the Whole meeting. With all city alderpersons, our mayor, city administrator, and senior staff present, we will review, discuss, conduct Q&A, and come to a consensus on the fiscal year 2021 budget. That has been a collaborative effort with the mayor, Marquez, city administrator Vanna, and city staff. I will serve as your facilitator tonight. Tonight is our third meeting in a series of meetings with the end goal of being to have a public hearing on the budget at the city council meeting for a vote to approve on Monday, April 6th. I plan to and hope to, I said that last week and it didn't happen, to conclude tonight's meeting around 9 p.m. If need be, the next committee as a whole meeting will take place next Tuesday, March 10th at 6:30 in council chambers. It is, however, my hope that we can complete the city's fiscal year 2021 budget review tonight. Last week, on February 25th, we covered the police department's budget and a sizable portion of the municipal services budget. The prior week, we reviewed the general fund, revenue and expenses, which included the following budgets: city council, administrative, and community development. All of these discussions can be viewed on the city website with a video. Tonight, we will start off with the architecture firm ARIA that will share their analysis on the municipal services garage and facilities on South Frontage Road. All city council members received hard copies of the fiscal year 2021 budget along with summary pages and supporting documents dated February 10th. All of this information has been published on the City of Darien website. These meetings are being broadcast on Darien Channel 6 and will be available for viewing on the City of Darien website. To start out, Treasurer Corrin, do you have anything to add before we get started?
Not at this time.
Okay. Administrator Vanna, did you want to say anything before we get started?
No, I'll wait.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan Gombeck, where he might have something to say, and then he can make the introductions.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Sullivan. Good evening, Administrative Whole Finance Committee. I'd like to introduce to you this evening at the podium Tom Surgott. Tom Surgott is with TRIA Architecture. He has completed our space allocation study, and the space allocation study basically relates to what's our current space facility at, what our needs are, and as well as somewhat the future. Tom, I'd like to turn it over to you, and Tom will be presenting about a 7-minute overall view of what they have done and completed. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Tom Zerga from TRIA Architecture. I'm one of the owners and partners of TRIA. Live in Clarendon Hills. Our office is in Burr Ridge, so we're pretty close to Darien, so it's right down the street. But as Dan said, we did complete this space needs analysis for the village, or for the Public Works building, sorry. in January. So the first thing we did basically was just kind of take a tour of the space, measure it, make sure all of our information was correct as far as size. We were doing a facility review to multiple things at one time. One was documenting the existing conditions of the space, anything that we saw, rusted walls, roofing, try to kind of put everything in one spot so you have all the costs that were needed to just repair the building as is. The building is quite old, it's really maxed out. So the other part of our space needs analysis was also saying, how can we maximize everything on that property and still make it work? So after numerous layouts and talking with Chris and with Dan, which were very helpful, trying to lay out the space, it's all in your book, we can follow along on the monitor as well. But basically, we were trying to maximize every square foot. So taking all the equipment that the village has, which is in multiple locations right now, and trying to consolidate that in one location at the current Public Works facility. So that was a challenge. So we looked at everything. I mean, we went the building to the maximum property line that we can go. Basically every direction we can go on that property and still make it safe and not going, obviously, to multiple stories. So that was a challenge in itself, just to fit everything on site. So we inventoried everything. Chris gave us all his equipment as is that are scattered throughout the town to try to fit it in there. We did our best. We got a good portion of it, about 95% roughly. But there's still, if you maxed out the property, spent the money, and put everything in there, you would still be short. You couldn't fit all your current equipment on site right now. And most importantly, there's no room for any future growth. For a town of your size, who knows what's going to happen in 5-10 years from now, what new equipment you're going to purchase. We did try to account for that in the cost, but as far as physically fitting everything on site, it was definitely a challenge. So in the master plan book that you have, and I'll go with a screen here, we did a cost estimate, again, documenting existing conditions, whatever we saw, ADA requirements. Again, you're grandfathered in with a lot of items just because you haven't touched them, but as soon as you touch anything, it opens up the whole can of worms as far as making things accessible, making them safe, making it energy efficient. The biggest things for your current building right now are just lack of space. Doesn't meet current ADA by any means. And just doesn't have all the spaces that a typical public works building has. We have done a few public works buildings in the area. We have one being built right now for City of Palos Hills, which is basically very equivalent to your town size and your equipment size. So it was a good resource to use. So we used that. So in comparison, that building, the one we're doing at Palos, is about 43,000 square feet. Your current building now is 12,000 square feet. So considerably smaller than what's there right now. Some other stats we have in there. I mean, the towns are similar. Palos Heights, the population, roughly 12,000. You're at 22,000. The acreage for the public works site that we're doing, and again, this other building is just a good comparison just because it's current and it's a similar town size to you guys. So that's a 5-acre site. Your current site is 2.5. So you can see that it's tight as is. The faculty size for Palos is 43,000. You're at 12. And then off-site staff parking, Palos has 56. You currently have 22, but you need 36. So you're short there as well. So those are all things we're kind of using in comparisons. So going back to the package here, so we have all the pictures that show, existing conditions. We're documenting everything. Oops. Existing model, again, just showing you easily what's there right now. Everything that we can. So this next rendering shows everything in blue. Again, is that we're talking about as far as maximizing the site, whatever we can to fit it on site, to even get close. We really cannot maximize any more what's there, and without being sacrificing safety. And it's just, again, it's all just existing data on the site. How we maxed it out as far as the bins, using the existing salt dome, maximizing the building. And I'm going to skip to this one slide here. So this is the existing build. This is your building proposed. So you can barely see this line right here. You can kind of follow this. I don't know if you can see the cursor there, but in the lower right quadrant over here is your existing building. So essentially, we were wrapping the building with additional square footage to increase the office size, locker rooms, all the things you're deficient in for the building right now. The green area is additional storage to fit all your storage requirements, parts storage, Christmas tree storage, whatever. The light blue area is all indoor vehicle parking, trying to maximize the existing building plus the addition. The purple area is a maintenance bay. And then this over here, this white area is a fuel storage. So again, that is to your property line. We couldn't maximize it anymore. And that was kind of really the end result of this study. It was just seeing what you have, understanding it, being here to answer any questions as far as, where do you go from here, and develop that cost estimate. So that's kind of the overview that I have, if that's sufficient.
That's fine, Tom. Maybe you can go over the costs real quick in regards to, and that's, who's following it, you can look on page, it's 1 of 1, preliminary cost estimate. It'll be right before the pictures.
Right. So we just broke out the project as far as renovating the building, any additions that were proposed. Again, the task at hand was to, how can we fit everything on site if it was in a perfect world? So that was the study. So there's additions as far as the additional space in the garage and office areas and locker rooms like we talked about, and then improvements to the site overall, replacing items that need to be replaced. Again, we couldn't maximize the site anymore, but it's just replacing items that are there, for instance, the bins, or increasing the parking capacity of the property. So everything's on there, and then the 3 columns to the right that have the yellow at the bottom, the first column was the proposed master plan. So pretty much everything that's in this whole packet, all those notes. So that was a total, with contingencies in there as well and fees, was roughly about $7.9 million, about $8 million. Again, that's just putting it all in there. It's a basic budget. But you can see how that compares to, and then the other columns were the minimal renovation. You see that 2.5 number. So that was just saying, let's fix what is there and do the best we can with the property, not really increasing the overall size, but just fix the things that are there. And the last column was just kind of putting a future cost estimate. The longer we wait, the costs go up. So that was about a 10% factor. That was at 8.7. So going back to Payless, just to kind of give you a real world example, that was in the executive summary. So the building, your building proposed based on everything that we categorized, again, with the help of Dan and Chris, was at, say, $8 million. The building, this does not include land costs, but the building proposed at Payless, which is $43,000, again, where we need to be for anyways, was at $7.6 million. And those are actual costs, under construction, walls are going up right now. So that was kind of the comparison that we're using, just to have a real world example and not just numbers.
7.6 for a new building?
Their building was 7.6, apples to apples, comparison, again, not land cost, but apples to apples as far as, the building and parking lots and A&E fees and construction fees, that's all in there.
Tom, you noted at the municipal services meeting that if the public works workers were to vacate the facility, it would probably be about a 20% cost reduction from that 7.9. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's from last time, so you mean vacate the property? What?
In other words, if we moved everything there and you just had complete use of that facility to build that facility?
Yeah, there's cost in here. Yeah, that's right. There's a factor in there. Is this cost to renovate is keeping the building active and shuffling things around. So if you can move everything, it's easier said than done. Move all your equipment out for a good period, maybe a year, 8 months to a year. There'd be some cost saving because you're not physically there and working around you guys. Because the idea, the project would be phased. This is just kind of showing everything at one time, but you can build the building, essentially, we're building the building around the existing building to maximize that, but then there's also renovations within the existing building that have to be accounted for as well. So there could be a cost savings for sure if you vacate the building.
They would have to, under that plan where you would build around and they would continue working, when you started breaking walls down, they would have to vacate
Yes, I mean, for safety alone, there's going to be some phasing where they'll have to shift things around. Again, they build as much as they can on the outside first, and then once they punch through, they have to do that. But there's extensive work to punch through the building.
I think the thing that needs to be noted, and this came up at Municipal Services, that the blue drawing, that drawing that shows the blue and it shows the wraparound, they're actually encompassing the parking that's in back of the building up to the property line. So in effect, you're losing, that picture right there, you're losing all your parking, you're losing more parking. So you're going from what, how many spaces do you have back there, Chris?
Yeah, probably 15 or something, 15 or so.
So you
Yeah,
would
it's
lose
a rough
those
guess.
16 parking spaces.
And I mean, we utilize parking in front of like the bay doors as well right now. So I mean, we're parking equipment in front of the bay doors, personal parking on the back property line and anywhere we can get them, so.
Yeah. Another thing to remember too is just the efficiency, and that's one of the things we noticed with the building. The way they do the best they can right now is parking vehicles in the building, so you can fit them more or less 2 or 3 deep. But every time you got to get a vehicle or a piece of equipment, it's a shuffle game. You know, someone's got to take this truck out, move this one in, move this one back in there. The new layout or the other building as example, or all current like public works facilities, more or less have a one direction in. You drive in, park the vehicle, back it out, you go out. You never really want to back the truck out, so it's more efficient as far as getting equipment out and not wasting that time of shuffling things around. And for the seasonal stuff too, I know your other off-site facilities are being utilized, but they're crammed in there. They're not just go there, get a piece of equipment. It's go there, move everything out of there, get that equipment, put this stuff back in there. As you said, it was like a Tetris game. So there's a lot of inefficiencies with that.
Hey, Tom, if you could maybe just go over the space, the total space that we currently have percentage-wise, and if we were to maximize the site percentage-wise again, to how much equipment would be in there. We're still not at 100%. If I recall, we were close to 75% then?
Yeah,
So
79, so on page 2 of the report, executive summary. So proposed equipment storage as per the master plan, on-site interior storage, you're at 79% of your storage. So that's still 21% of your stuff would be off-site. We just can't fit it.
and that's not for the future. And maybe if you could just hit on the, semis, congestion, traffic congestion. I think you were there I think you were there the one day when there was traffic. Basically, we had semis coming in and out. I'm not sure if
We were there. I mean, we've been on site numerous times and just seeing the truck traffic come in there. The biggest thing I saw as a concern of safety is having the public using the mulch and with their own vehicles, and then having a bus or a truck or a large equipment coming in that site. It was very tight in that open space there. Some of the other ways we do it nowadays is really keeping the public outside of that heavy equipment area. Again, going back to Payless, mulch and any kind of recycling areas for the public that can use, which is nice, is outside the fence line, on the property, but outside the fence line. Then the public works trucks and equipment go beyond that line. Public's not allowed back there, again, for safety. So that was a big thing we did. And that's the thing, like the open space between your salt building and the existing building, we couldn't shrink that down anymore. That's that space in between because of the turning radiuses of all the trucks. You need that space, even just to get fuel into the space. It's a truck coming in. I don't know if it's a full semi. Yes. So, I mean, you have to take account for that, getting trucks in and out, not only just your own equipment, it's those deliveries.
Question, if you're showing the, kind of maxing out the site as an addition.
Correct.
If you tore the building down, could you get a larger building than if you are adding on to the current building?
We didn't study that yet, but we studied a little bit about that. So you can take the building down, and right now the orientation of the building, ignoring the blue, is, let's just call it east-west. If we rotate it north-south, would be for much more efficient. This is the layout because, again, you want vehicles to come in, go into the middle of the building, park on both sides, and
Yep.
exit. And that's more efficiently. And the way the building is right now, you can't do that. The blue area, to me, it would be, I test my own question with that, saying, well, why can't you do that to the building right now? The blue area on the right side of the white building is a berm right now. It's all earth. So you can't really enter from that side right now. It was never designed for that, and that's where the office area is, so it doesn't work just by moving the ground away. But there'd be some more efficiencies to fitting the building on site that way, but you're still going to lose square footage. I mean, we maximize the site and maximize the building on that site, but ideally, you would want to rotate the building to have more space
Yeah, but-
around the
but
building.
my question was in gaining size, you're not really.
I don't think,
you're not-
I would think we gain more, definitely more efficiency around there, but we
Right.
would lose square footage on the building for sure. Because we would have more circulation space around it.
Tom, can you provide an opinion on what to do to move forward, or a recommendation, in your opinion?
I mean, it's a big financial decision, but I mean, for a town your size, based on what we've seen before, I mean, it's easy to say build a new building, but it's an inefficient layout, it's an old building, there's a lot of issues with it as far as your size. And I said, this was a good study, we spent a lot of hours on this to say, like, can we take all the equipment, every piece of equipment that Chris gave us, we put it on there, it does not fit day one. So to spend a lot of money adding on, fixing up the building, you're still gonna be short. You're gonna be short with the stuff you have already, and you're gonna be short with future stuff that you don't know is coming. You may add a different program to Public Works, and you just won't have it. You'll be stuck already. And the regularity of the site doesn't bode well as well. I mean, the salt building is there where it is. So, you know, we've maximized the space around it, but it's not the most efficient layout. It's a triangular shape. That's not the most efficient layout. So ideally, a site that's square and rectangular, not even square, rectangular, is ideal for Public Works facilities because you want them to be long and narrow. With parking on the outside for staff, vehicles on the inside, administration in the front, and public outside. That's the formula that works.
Tom, just with the salt shed, it looks like it's a nice size. I know it's all up and down the tollway, they have all these
Domes.
and everything. Would it be possible to relocate our salt shed somewhere else, so then you'd have that space available for developing as part of the public works?
It's,
Yeah, again, I think, getting back to our salt shed is unique in a way that it holds, for the space that we take up for the existing salt shed, it basically stores all our salt for a year, whereas the dome of that size would store less salt just based on the configuration, because you never really fill that full dome up with the walls, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom.
you're right.
Where do we find another place for salt? Forgot what size that building was. Was it third? I can't even recall what size it was. There's always that possibility. I know we tried several years ago I did contact IDOT and said, hey, could we do some type of joint participation within the medians? Let's utilize the medians for a salt shed. The answer was no.
Do we need to have storage for all our salt? Because now that we have the contract, we keep buying it periodically anyway.
Economies of scale. What we try to do is, depending on what the salt is, where we at with the end of the year with inventory, if pricing is looking good, then we'll buy it where we'll be 2/3 ahead for next year's game, let's say.
It hasn't always worked out that way, so I'm not sure we've taken full advantage of that. I know we've tried to where we can, but the pricing's been very variable on
Yeah, 3 years ago, I believe, when we did take that full toll, was close to $67 a ton. Now it's approximately $82 a ton, and we're budgeting obviously $85 this year. And part of that is, it's my understanding, there's work on the Mississippi River, so the barges or whatever the operation is somewhat more strategically different routes, if you want to say.
Tom,
But-
if the salt shed was gone and you had more space available, would you come out the front and bring that building up? I know if you tore it down, you'd turn it around. But considering where it is now, where you have the fuel thing and where you have that other, would you come out more and increase the square footage?
Yeah, I mean, a building, again, removing the salt dome would help, because it gives us more property to deal with. The two antennas that are in the corner as well, kind of restrict that site as well, but we can work with that. But yeah, we'd look at the whole site to see, and we haven't really studied it in detail to see if you did a complete tear down of everything and put a new building there, that would be a separate study to see how it fits, but it would definitely help. I mean, just for parking alone, I mean, I could envision that in the bigger part of the site would be the building, you know, this longer building we talk about. Then with a skinnier part with a salt dome would be an ideal spot for more administrative, public area, parking areas on that side. And then the back half would be for heavy equipment, with enough room to drive around the facility. So it's definitely possible to look at.
And Tom, just for information, that back of the salt building is probably, we went for a rezoning on that, and I believe it's 5 foot from the back lot line already.
is, yeah.
So it is, I just want you to, so you know it's maxed out from setback sizing.
Right, because there's the existing retention pond is right next to it right now. You can't go any further.
That salt shed cost us about,
$250,000.
yeah, we cut costs because of, we subcontracted a lot of.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when was that built?
About 5 or 6, well, no, it was during, John Galano was on council, what was that, about 10 years ago?
Yeah, I thought it was 9 years ago when we built it, and I thought it was 280,000 with everything all in.
It originally was gonna cost over 300,000, we were gonna reject it. And Ted and I and John Milan sat down with Dan and we talked about subcontracting it. And in subcontracting, I think we did it for about 220.
Is that what it was? Was it 220?
I remember that figure, 220.
So clearly, the site, the way it's proposed and what we see on the screen, does not allow enough parking space for staff.
No,
So-
we're short. And then even more short and during the summer rush where you have even more
Right.
staff.
Because I think everyone here in Chambers has had the opportunity to visit the space recently. So what's your response to losing parking spaces? How would you deal with that?
Losing the parking spaces, that's not good either. And just a side comment with Mike's comment to put the salt bin somewhere else, really, we're no further ahead because now we have to go and travel, take our dump trucks and go to this other site along with machinery and load the salt up there, wherever there is. And also our operation includes adding brine or additive to the salt for the sub-zero. So it's to move the operation of the salt bin. If you look at the picture, there's a round dome there. That's our anti-icing equipment. So if we were to move it away, now we still have to go get the salt somewhere
That
else.
does it all the time. I mean, they're all over the place. I mean, they're trucks. They don't have trucks just parked there by the dome. I mean, it's doable.
But-
Right now, you're moving and jockeying things around too.
I think of everything that Public Works needs at the facility, salt's number one. The IDOT has them all over, Mike, but they do have staff members all over. They have extra backhoes all over. You know, of everything we do, that's services. That's probably the most critical. And I don't know how we can live with a salt dome not at the center of the services. But
Parking and the salt dome are two critical factors.
what is, Joe?
Parking and, Tom brought up something that I thought was
You said you could
critical,
manage
and that
that
was when you
on the
have
site,
residents go in there, separating the residents from the,
That's what you said.
you know, the trucks and everything else. Dan, have we talked to the Forest Preserve District about the Wingren property at all? Because there are 12,000 acres over there, and we did talk to them about a parking lot and putting our employees parking over there. What if we build a salt dome over there and build a parking and put the salt dome facility, the de-icing facility, and everything on that property with additional parking for our employees over there?
For the salt storage idea, I would probably agree with the exception, I'm not sure how the Forest Preserve would take that, because with the wetlands right there and that salt operation, the residue going into the wetlands, potentially, I hate to use the word contaminating it, but runoff, that would may be a concern to them. I mean, we could double check that, but I just want to be cautious.
I'm just looking at possibilities, Dan, that's.
Sure. No, I agree. And again, I know that the salt has to be, when it's not in use, that it's got to be put away. Everything has to be clean because of the stormwater ordinance. That's one of those things that they don't want that runoff, that calcium going into rivers, streams, or banks. So that's very important.
Tom, we had a discussion with the Forest Preserve about the property behind the building. That's a wetland area. So we really we couldn't even, because we talked to them about not annexing, but utilizing some of that property and building a parking lot back there that they could utilize. And she showed us where all of that is wetlands right behind that facility, so we couldn't move that building further back.
Yeah, we noticed, I mean, there's some water issues back there right now, just kind of drying the site.
Tom, in the front, and I'm sorry for mispronouncing the name of your architecture
No
firm.
problem.
So in the front, where you see the fence and the grassy area that's on the side of the salt dome, obviously none of that would be able to be used for like the mulch pickup from the public or anything like that, to have like a mulch area there.
Well, I mean, the way the bins are right now,
They're at the back, but if we
Right.
moved them to the front.
we could, and going back to parking, probably answer both questions at the same time. So the parking we had, so there's 22 parking spaces on site right now. And actually, the spot exactly where you're mentioning, is proposed new. That gives us a total of 30. So we did gain 8 parking spots, but we were still short at 36 is the number I have. I don't know if that included summer or not. So we're still short 6. So we did make some improvements, but we're short 6. It's hard to tell in the rendering because on the back side there's additional parking spots. But yes, to answer your question, the mulch is still proposed in the bins like it is now, so the safety concern is still there. Moving to the front is a good idea. We're just going to lose another 7 spots though.
But couldn't you put the spots where the bins are and then swap them out?
We can do that. They're not ideal to have, all that or not equipment, but the spoils there. But we can look at that. There is a space between, again, I don't know if that cursor was.
Tom, don't forget, we have current storage, outside storage with the larger equipment there.
Yep.
So, I want to be careful by committing to saying yes, and especially since the grade runs back towards the South Mary.
Yeah,
Putting those bins there, I would just be concerned with runoff, meaning that the parking lot will constantly be filthy.
And then obviously Sterling Bay is just adjacent to that. And that was property once owned by the city of Darien, but it was sold many years ago and then changed hands, and then they built the facility. Is there any way to access some of their excess parking or some type of agreement with them? Or is there any land at the back of that property that we could purchase?
It looks like they utilized every part of that property because it's either parking, building, or stormwater management.
Yeah, the answer is no. Tom, Tom, were you saying something? I'm not sure you were.
Yeah, well, can you, for our audience, what's the history of the property? So, from my understanding, the city used to own it. This is before I was on council, so could you, I know we can't do anything about it now, but I'm curious, what was the history and the rationale of selling that property if we knew this was going to come down the line?
I think
Real quickly, we own that property, and we were going to build a joint facility on that property with the school districts and the fire department. And we actually had money, I believe it was a grant, about $500,000, and we were going to build a joint facility for the school buses, our equipment, park district, and it fell through. None of them could come up with the money to make the facility happen. So with that in mind, Frank Sigmuntovich purchased the property from us. I think it was a little over $2 million. And Frank was going to build a Top Golf setup. Even before there was a Top Golf, he was going to build a multi-level facility. Frank was building warehouses and stuff, but he was going to build that there. Frank got cancer. Frank died. He sold the property, and then the property was sold again to, I think, the Crown family, who sold it to Sterling Bay.
But since the property has sold, has Darien grew any? Because this lack of space has always been there, it seems like. So what was the reason to sell it to a private residence or whatever the case may be, if we always know that this is always going to be a pain point or an issue we'd have to 10 years down the line deal with?
There was never a consensus among the council that this was a project to go after. So when the property was being sold, it wasn't the mindset like it seems of the council now that we need to do something. For a long time, it was felt that it was adequate. Maybe not the best, maybe not the most convenient, but it served our purposes, and we're not a community that was growing double in size. So we were making the best of the site, and so there was no reason at that point to say let's keep that property and spend money for a new public works building. It's just now it's taken a different life.
So if we haven't grown, then
Joe, you're making a face.
what do we also need then? I guess like you made a good point. We haven't grown, and is it the additional trucks that we have that got added in, additional services? I know we do a lot of the pick up a lot of the other stuff. So
Well, I don't think the council's said yet, do we need this or not? I haven't heard that. I think maybe that's after the presentation, that you'll have to, say your piece in terms of if you think if it's worth moving forward in a facility, because this isn't math here. This is should we do something? It's more of a feeling. We'll have some trucks outside, but this isn't, something that's right or wrong. It's just what a position you're going to take. And I think once we're done with the questioning, then the council will have to get a poll to see if this is something they do feel needs to be done or are focused on or made a priority.
I just wanted clarity about like this area around it. Obviously, the forest preserve is not an option because of the way we're maximizing every inch of the property that we own based on what you've proposed, correct?
Correct. You're landlocked on all sides, and you can't maximize any more without going up, which is not ideal.
Do we have any other land that we own?
Actually, we've been working on, and I'll let Brian talk about it. I know we've had some inquiries about the Public Works facility. We were given an offer. I forwarded that letter of intent back over to the mayor and Brian for further discussion. We just haven't discussed it yet. In conjunction with that, we've been looking at another property adjacent to Lamar Road. With no real cost to that yet. The ideal opportunity, and again, is it feasible? I don't know that at this point, is to look at what's being offered for the Public Works facility, and number two, to take a look at opportunities along Lamar Road, and one more location off of Frontage Road. Those are only two potentials that I could see for somewhat of call it 5 to 7 acres. I say 5 to 7 acres based on the shape. If it's rectangular, like Tom said, 5 would probably be sufficient. If it's somewhat irregular, 6.5 maybe. So that's something that we've been scouting out. Chris, I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
No, I think you covered it.
I think
So your
the question
question,
was,
we
do
don't
we have any
have lesser-
property right now?
We
don't
don't
have
own
it,
any
no.
I
property
don't
right
think we
now,
have
correct?
anything right
No.
now.
No.
There's nothing right now.
With the exception of, we have a couple off of Manning Road, but those are really, single lots, if you want to say.
Where we have the 3 barns, the 3 sheds. in the
Correct,
garage.
yes.
Yeah, you don't have anything big enough to build what you have to.
We put our,
what you need.
we store our summer stuff in those sheds, don't we, and in that garage?
Yeah, we have different stuff inside of each building, but yeah.
But within the city limits, because you would want to have this facility within the city limits, there's really not many options for open areas to pursue.
Correct, there's 2 options.
Okay, any other questions?
The first proposal, the first column, maybe for the, I heard this, but for the sake of the council, what do you get for the 2.5? Explain how when you touch the building, how you have a lot of ADA work then you're required to do.
Right. That's probably the first way. Starting with that. So yeah, anything we touch. My license is on the line, so we have to make it all handicap accessible. So for instance, the toilet rooms are not even close to what they need to be right now. Locker room facilities, male, female, doesn't matter if male or female work there, you have to have them. Elevator access, if it's a 2-story space, these are all basic requirements, but they are definitely required. And then, of course, just necessary egress to get out of the space. Even cost of just the re-roofing it, that's a big cost right there, is re-roofing it, and I believe that's covered in here. So the items included in that 2.5 number, so existing garage reconfiguration, so that's at $369,000. And that's just modifying the building to make it a little bit more efficient. Right now, you're just having cars kind of come in, so we're just going to clear out the space, make it more open, make it more efficient for vehicles coming in and out. The existing storage and mezzanine reconfiguration, same thing, modifying I'm trying to maximize square footage for storage, like multiple levels. Maybe we can do something with that for summer storage, as long as we have an elevator to get to it. And then everything else was kind of lumped into one area. ADA, egress, energy code, roofing, life safety. Those are all the things we documented at the beginning. Just, all the things that are just worn out. The offices, for instance, the windows. The windows in every window in that building is shot. I mean, I'm sure you guys that work to know that some you can't even see through. So you need overall envelope, windows, insulation, roofing, ADA upgrades, elevator access. Look at everything as a whole to make it safer.
And that still wouldn't give us any extra space, correct?
Correct. And then we had on there, the other big number on that line item, or that column, was paving, existing lot and new area. So repaving, there's a lot of asphalt and stuff that's worn out, and trying to increase some of the square footage for parking. So a lot of the parking you see by the fence line is currently grass. So we just pushed it to kind of push out the property a little bit further and go to your property edge. So that there's money in there. So these were just the minimum items that we discussed as far as, what's the minimum cost just to upgrade the building, not increase it, just upgrade it.
And there's a cost to having to do the work on the same property, because if you were to take the current municipal services spot and find another spot, temporarily, and then you can just fix it all in one spot. The fact that you've got to piecemeal this, because we still have to have our day-to-day operation, that drives up the cost as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of school work, so public projects as well. So some jobs, they become 2-year jobs because we just can't get enough done in one school summer, so they become 2. But it's that mobilizing, remobilizing, there is a cost to that.
If you were to do less than the minimal and just do piecemeal projects in terms of remodeling, like bathrooms and stuff, would you still be required to adhere to the ADA compliance the minute you touch the building?
As soon as we touch one wall, one door, it all has to be upgraded.
But if not, if you did the roof, right? If you just
Right, there's different levels.
anything interior-wise is what
There's different levels of ADA. So if you ask me to fix the bathrooms, then those bathrooms have to be ADA compliant. Whatever
Would
they
you
are.
have to add an elevator because you fixed the bathrooms?
No, there's different tiers of ADA. So if it was anything that I touched itself, a closet, a door, whatever, ADA. And there's different thresholds. Basically, it's the replacement cost of the building. So the first threshold is from 0 to 15% of the cost. So if I put a bathroom in there, that's not even close to 15% of the building. I make that ADA. But once you get to the next level, say we renovate a whole bunch of stuff, okay, now we have to renovate the whole, there's a certain threshold. Once you get over 15%, now we have to look at the building as a whole and say, okay, you don't have an elevator, now you need one, because we've renovated so much that it's the dollar amount that really does it. But yeah, if you did a roof by itself, that's fine, that's 1 for 1. You did a bathroom by itself, the bathroom's ADA, you're good. But once you add them together, then you have the idea is that you're doing that much renovation, you should do it the right way and make the whole building ADA, not just the parts you touch. So that's how the ADA works.
And is that assuming that it's a building for the public also, or is that assuming it's for employees?
It doesn't matter. I mean, you could have an employee one day and next day they broke an ankle, they're in crutches, or you have.
No, my question though is because at one point there were different tiers for services. It doesn't matter if it's.
It doesn't matter
so if
because
the public doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, because it's exactly like you have your own staff that all of a sudden has been there for 30 years. All of a sudden they're wheelchair bound. They have to still be able to work there, or anybody that comes to the meeting, a consultant comes to the meeting, the building has to be accessible. You're a public entity, even if it was a private entity, you still have to make it ADA accessible.
What if you were to do it over several years? Do the roof this year, you're saying no ADA. Next year, you do another set of minor projects.
You could piecemeal it, yeah. Then as long as you're under that threshold of that replacement cost, you can do that. If you intentionally did it that way, it could be you're stringing it together, and it would actually cost you more in the long run by doing 6 projects over 6 years as opposed to doing 1 project in 1 year would cost you more. But you can do that, yes.
How old is that building? Do we know?
I think it was the late 70s, if I'm not mistaken. It's basically a pole barn building is what it is.
Yeah, there's very few drawings at all. Wasn't it a trucking facility before?
Correct. Trailer repair facility of sort.
Yeah.
The offices were utilized as what we can gather is some type of dispatch center. It's the way it's set up.
We used to keep all of our public work supplies here behind City Hall, behind where the police department, we had our salt storage, and we had all of our other storage. Back here, we really didn't have a public works facility. And this was a trucking firm or a repair firm, and we bought this building for a couple $1 million, $2.5 million, I think. I think that's what we paid for it.
Are there any other questions for our architect? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tom.
And I guess the next thing I would propose to Administrator Vanna was, if we were to pursue any of these options, how would we pay for it?
Bond.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank
Very
you.
nice, thank you.
He's got to figure it out. I think. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
The head of the family.
Well, thank you.
Well, as we get into the capital projects fund, there'll be a totality of revenue we need, not just for the building, but to do the improvements for a new building, we would go out for bond, and we'd have to secure, depending on the amount. I have some scenarios. If a $15 million bond for 20 years would increase a resident's taxes over those 20 years approximately $219, with the assumption of a house similar to Mr. Corin's. So that's an estimate, depending on your home value, that would fluctuate. If we are looking at also looked at a $8 million bond for 25 years, that adds approximately $131 to the taxes.
How much money is that in total, though? I don't care about the taxes, I just care about the total dollar amount. What does that add to the amount to the city every year?
Well, the 8 million would be an annual principal and interest of $495,000.
Okay.
And let's see, the other scenario of the $15 million for the 20-year, that's an annual principal and interest of $1,065,000.
Thank you.
And we have 2 bonds left right now, correct? That we're paying on?
That's for
Well,
water.
We have 3 bonds, 2 that we abate, and we have one that's lasts about 3 more years. It's only a couple $100,000 in total for principal and interest, so it's a small amount on the tax bill.
But it's out of the water fund?
No, the 2 are, but we abate those. The one that we don't abate is it's a general fund used in capital projects.
Does anyone have questions for Brian about that? Okay. Dan?
Yes, I'm not sure if there's any type of direction. Like I said, I know we have an offer on the table currently. And if there's any further direction to look or negotiate with brokers to see what opportunities there are.
You're looking for direction from the council, Dan? on
Yes.
Selling the current property?
That's one option, correct?
Well,
yes.
there's 3 options. We do nothing, we rehab, or we look for another site. I mean, those are really it. Those are the 3.
I know we're probably not allowed to talk about it, but the offer for the property is fairly minimal. I mean, it goes nowhere near what we're talking about in terms of dollars on these projects, so it's not like we can sell that and for 50% more, we can,
We could say the amount, it's no secret.
okay,
I mean, if we're buying land acquisition, we but if we're looking at the property, they started lower, and they're about at, the last letter said 4.5 million, I think.
4.75 million.
one time we talked, I thought it was about 2.5.
It was, and then we basically targeted and said it didn't meet the target pricing, so they did up it to 4.75.
Okay, so just hypothetically, say you took the offer, found another location for about that price, would you be able to stay on the property while the new site's being developed? Or would you have to, leave the property, find a temporary site, and...
That's a loaded question. At the same time, I know there will be some time.
They don't want it quick, Dan. I got the impression they
They
want
want
it.
it quick, but pending on, there'll be some zoning hearing.
What's the
zoning-
use?
And the use would be for a cannabis growth facility. The zoning right now was for Sterling Bay. As you recall, that was allowed for a growth facility. since the Public Works facility is adjacent to this, that would take another zoning hearing for that location. So it'll be contingent on zoning, number one, the land negotiation on both sides, ours and potentially theirs. So again, for all this to happen, a minimal of 3 months before you'd even get into the land acquisition portion of it to be somewhat completed.
But have we even reached out to these other, you said there's 2 properties available. Do we know whether they are truly available
Yes.
for purchase?
One is. I just got the email 20 minutes ago, as a matter of fact.
And how quickly could one close on that if we were pursuing that direction?
Probably relatively quick.
Where's that property at now?
Currently, it's along Lamar Road. It's the Rockwell site. Again, with the Rockwell site there, and I'd have to look at the email a little further, but it appears that we would have to buy the entire site. So if we were to buy the entire site, maybe cost prohibitive is close to $7 million. Again, I don't know what that means as far as what the whole site is. So I don't want to give anybody the wrong information. It's 10 acres, so there is opportunity there to subdivide that as well. I'd have to do a little more homework and research to make sure what I'm referring to as far as amount of acres. And there's even a current office building there, office building / little bit of a warehouse that I think could be utilized for certain operations on that building that's there right now.
All right, I lost you. You said there's 10 or 12 acres there?
Something like that. I don't have the exact numbers. I need to do the exact.
You would subdivide the property,
Correct.
and we would sell off that portion of the property?
Correct.
Okay.
And that there's a building on the property that we could potentially use,
That's
retrofit
correct.
it for our offices.
Right. And since the land is already, there's a lot of non-pervious asphalt there, so as far as the stormwater management goes, we'd fall into that 80% impervious rule too, which is a good thing. So it's less on best management practices and detention facilities, so on and so forth. So, that's some of the very, very basic preliminary homework that I've been doing for the last couple weeks on and off.
Dan, how much work would it take to turn that current facility into a facility you could utilize? You have to knock down walls and stuff like that?
I didn't see the inside. I really have to take a look at the inside, but from the outside, certain things look doable. From the office, and again, my goal is to take the front facade, utilize the front facade, whether it's repainting it, something of that sort. It's of a stucco ephes type of system, and add on to that building the actual garage, because it is rectangular. So there's a good opportunity for that.
So the advantage of acquiring this particular site would be because you would have much greater land space and be able to create building structures that would be more conducive to operations
That is correct.
versus repurposing the site currently owned by the city.
Correct.
Any questions, more questions for Dan?
The 4.75, is that a overpayment on that property? Michael thought the 2 point something was less than what it's worth.
I had no idea. I just know that was the first offer that I heard him mention. And I'm comparing the 2.5 versus a potential commitment that we were talking about at the time of $15 million. So saying we're still 13 million short with that. So that was my only comparison. Has nothing to do with market values of the real estate.
Has that property been appraised, the current
Well, it
facility?
has not been appraised. I took a look at what the Sterling Bay on a square foot basis, and I don't have that number in front of me, but right now, the offer is a very generous offer that's been received.
And we don't need $15 million, do we, to build a new building?
Total, I'd say total with,
7.5,
right
right?
now,
The land, though.
the lands,
And the building.
the land with the building, I'm gonna estimate 13 to 15 million, and if you were to subtract this 4.75, so yes, it's somewhat reduced, but there's a lot of homework to put together, but again, looking for some direction, either we do nothing, or, we start to look at opportunities and bring them back to the municipal services, admin finance, again, some type of direction.
I'm sorry, what would be the cost of a new building?
About 7 million,
About 7 million,
Yes.
excluding land.
yes.
Okay.
Then you add the land to that, but then you back out the cost of the property that you're selling.
Sir, are we ballparking a $3 million loss, for lack of a better term, in a land swap?
Yeah, I'd say it's reasonable.
All right, another question, Tom?
So if, from what the new property would cost less what we're selling it
Okay.
for, we'd be about $3 million down.
Just for, for the raw material.
In yeah, well,
Sell some of that
possibly.
off.
Hopefully, but, okay. Yeah, and then just we obviously don't have this in the piggy bank, so my concern would be, like, obviously, we'd have to, go out, well, we wouldn't have to go out for referendum, we'd have to take a bond, and, the communities are already having education bonds put on their tax bills because of the schools, and the projects done both in District 99 and in District 86 and in even some of the grade school districts, so.
You know, unless we get lucky and get a cannabis retail store, it's gonna bring in $600,000-700,000 a year, which would pay for the building.
But that's an unknown.
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
an
yeah,
unknown.
Oh, I agree, but the time we get into this and stuff and get more numbers and stuff, hopefully we'll know. Comes June, we're gonna have an answer.
The other aspect of it is, we've been criticized quite a bit in terms of our cannabis discussions, that we really didn't reach out to the public and get their input on it. I think it's still also important to reach out to the public and, hey, do we need a new public? Would you like to have a new public works facility? At what cost? What are you willing to pay for it?
That's why I think Dan should have open houses and get the public to come see what they're putting up with right now, and let the public come through. But you may have to get liability insurance in case somebody kills himself going through the building.
Because we're home rule, this is not something that would end up on the ballot as a question, correct? This is,
Correct. No, the council has authority to bond for this,
right,
without referendum. yes.
without referendum.
But it could go to referendum if we chose,
Sure.
depending on what kind of feedback you get from the
A
residents.
non-binding referendum we could do.
Yeah.
What's the life expectancy of the current facility, or is it past it? I mean, I've been there, 20 times, so.
Since you were there last, Ted, that was what, 1900? No. No, since you've been there last, again, the roof is obsolete. So, the life of the building,
It depends how much you want to invest into it. If you want, right, Dan? I mean, really, that's the life of a building is how much, that's really the cost benefit of this.
right. And to be honest with you, I think I'll let Chris answer that question. Hate to put you on the spot, Chris, but I think, you guys are there every day.
Not a very
Yeah,
good day.
I mean, I guess the nuts and bolts of it is it seems to not really work all that well. I mean, if you're asking for, that portion, I mean, it seems like every day or every week you're finding something different wrong. I mean, where the roof's leaking in the shop, I mean, we have, tarp systems set up with hoses to direct the water down to the floor so that it's not dripping on heaters and equipment. I mean, so you get into, we had one window replaced in an office last year because water was literally just pouring into it. And I mean, this winter, on the few colder days that we had, I mean, it really wasn't that bad of a winter this year, but I mean, frost just literally coating the inside of windows. I mean, inside the office, our air conditioners, our furnaces can't keep up pretty much at any point, I mean, of the year. And it's not because we're setting the temperature so low, it's just that the building's just not energy efficient. So, I mean, there's a lot of, inadequacies, of, how you're dealing with things, I guess is basically it.
And in
Yeah,
the
with
end,
the roof-
even if we do the upgrades to the existing building, you're still not gonna have enough space.
No, and you're still, and I think he covered it, and it's about 80%. And I think when I sat down with Tom and Wes, one of the other gentlemen that works with him, we came up to, we're still going to be parking, $125,000 to $150,000 tractors outside. So I mean, at what, if you're spending $7 million or $8 million and you're still going to park a tractor outside, I don't know. Did you make it much better, I guess, is the end question. I hate to put it that way, but to me, that's a lot of money to still park the stuff outside. You know, and yeah, that's.
But aren't they meant to be outside? I mean, is it, how many years, does it take the lifespan, how many years back when they're left outside versus
I
inside?
think Dan's looked, and I don't think he's ever been able to really find anything that truly says what it does, to the life cycle of it. But the short of it is, yes, it's going to shorten the life cycle of it just based on, all the mechanicals being exposed. The pure nature of the elements of that building and everything that we do there with the corrosive, salt and the excessive amounts of dust and, the wood chips, floating through the air and everything like that. I mean, that's all bad stuff that you don't want in your equipment, on a consistent basis. And when it's just always there, there's no avoiding it. That's definitely going to wear down the components. You have hose, your hydraulic hoses and all those things are exposed to those elements. So, they're exposed to the sun, they're exposed to, things that are definitely going to shorten the lifespan. So, yeah.
And I have one more question. So assuming that whether we stay on the current site or move to another and we were to make an expansion or an improvement, you would still be using the current element, like the lifts and all the stuff would be moved into or over or remain in. Like, would there need to be then an additional budget for new equipment and other things to go in the facilities?
I think besides the pressure washer, everything else, the lifts could be taken. Go ahead, Chris. I'll let
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could take them. I think at a certain point you're at, they're passing the inspections when we have them inspected. I don't know, how long, the mechanicals of them are going to continue to last. So I guess you'd probably bring somebody in for a cost analysis on buying.
Because there'd be then additional equipment costs on top of the building cost. Like,
could be. I mean, you might have them for a few lifts or something like that. I don't think there's a huge. We don't have a lot of equipment in building equipment. You would have your air conditioners and furnaces and things like that. And I would assume if you would buy all that new, you wouldn't want to bring what we have. I don't think they're probably undersized for a building that's 3 to 4 times the size of ours. So I mean, I can't imagine they would work.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's really there are something that's tangible are the lifts and the air compressor and power washer. But the power washer, I know that's probably 5-7 years old now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
By the time you were to look at it for a 10-year life on that,
Might be able to bring the air compressor. We just had that.
Yeah,
up
that's
there. I mean,
something
again, you might find something bigger that supplies more air that just could fit in better space. So again,
okay, Brian?
So I think if the majority of the council is of the opinion we need to do something, I think the staff should get direction to look into this offer that was made. That offer might, again, it's all timing. If the property is in demand from a single particular user, and that might generate more revenue than normal, and this Rockwell site seems to be available, then I think the council, again, if the council is of the opinion that we should do something, I think it sounds like to me, and Dan and I have not talked a lot about the Rockwell because it's kind of just hot off the presses. But I think we should look at the offer we have and look at the Rockwell property and bring something back to the council a little more definitive.
I think too, the thing, Brian, along that same line of thought, if the council is serious about the possibility of selling the current site, looking at the Rockwell property, you've approved $55,000 for a new lift for that building. I see that as a wasted expenditure.
Yeah.
That would be something that you would cut out.
Well, I would, our analysis to come back to the council will not be done by the budget. We're almost there. I would leave the lifts in and we'll play it by ear. If the deal falls through, we need the lifts. But if we get some momentum and the deal seems to be something that's attractive, then we would hold off on the lift.
Right.
we don't have
So
to
I
buy
guess
the
my
lift right
question
away.
is, to get a feel from the council tonight, I see it as, my first question is, if there's no support, like just stay status quo, patchwork on the building, then we just don't even pursue or have any more conversations with people buying, selling, acquiring land, okay?
Yes,
Then,
I agree.
do we want to go to the next level of saying, well, rehab the current facility at a minimum, like that $2.5 million thing, and then there's expand the facility on its current site, and then there's relocate and build new, that, like, so there's, I actually see 4 things.
Yeah, there's a number of options. That's why I was trying to whittle
So
down.
what are we
for the-
trying to walk away with tonight?
If the council thinks we should do something, then that's the first consensus.
Right.
And then if the council thinks we should look at the rehab of the building on its site and not look at expanding, we should try to whittle it, I think we should try to whittle it down to one thing so we can actually go out and start doing something. Because again, this has been talked about for a number of years, never a consensus on we should relocate. So I think we should whittle down to the council's preference tonight.
Okay,
I have one more
Yes, Mike.
question. I asked this question in a previous meeting, and I just want to make sure before we start going in any one of those directions. Dan, I asked you this question before. If we sell the public works site, we have those towers, and we generate a lot of revenue from those towers. Even if we sell that site, we will be able to retain those towers and continue generating
The answer
those
is
revenues.
yes.
so we would like have an easement, and that would stay our little corner of the world?
Correct. There's an easement in place already.
Wouldn't have to move the towers, because someone
No.
said move the towers, okay.
Are there any costs?
And Mike, we have not, Dan, unless Dan's talked to the person, we haven't talked specifically. They're not, in my opinion, they're not intending on coming in, buying this property and getting this cash revenue from our tower. So that, in our mind, is excluded.
Right.
We'd have to verify that.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I want to
right.
make sure we're on all
Are there
fours
any
before it
cost
goes.
in investigating the purchase and sale of the land? Because you said you're looking for direction. If we give you direction, is there any cost to doing that?
Appraisal, at least an appraisal for appraisal for 2 sites, really, whether it's our site and the other site that we're looking at. And again, what are those
Fairly
costs?
nominal costs.
Yeah, and again, are they $1,000 a piece? Are they $5,000 a piece? Obviously, if anything's over 5,000, we would come back for that. If there's the opportunity to have it for 1,000 per development, then we probably, see what's left in Brian's contingency. And
Wouldn't the
utilize that.
seller of the Rockwell land do the appraisal themselves?
I'm
No,
sorry?
we would have to.
Okay.
We would need to give the council something to verify the price.
Okay.
But I think, Dan, if you haven't been on the inside, we would need something like you did for the building. We'd have to have some professional come in.
Right.
Because there will be a cost to retrofit that for our needs.
Well, right, we have to take a look
I'm
at,
just talking preliminary costs.
Right, preliminary on
At this point,
appraisals,
the only
right.
costs are going to be the appraisals.
Well, yeah, the appraisals, but the
If the
count.
land swap doesn't make financial sense, we'll stop it at that. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
if it ends up costing us, instead of 6 million, that changes everything.
Yeah, but I don't know exactly, and I don't know the Rockwell building. Those are probably as old as our public works buildings. So
I'm not
we
even
could.
thinking about the buildings right now. I'm just
Well,
thinking
if the
about
building-
land
Right.
swaps.
But if that building costs $8 million to renovate too, that we have to have some idea of.
I think
But we know the Palos building costs 7.5
what we would do is,
to build.
at the
from
same,
scratch.
I mean,
I mean, if we can get something in that same range, it kind of gives us an idea.
and we'll be able to tell almost immediately, at least to do a walkthrough of the property.
Yeah,
Walk through the
Yeah.
building and say, oh, wow, this is nothing, say they're 10 by 10 cubby holes. Okay, well, that's really rules that portion out. Now you start knocking down walls and, what does that cost? So I
We're not
understand what you're
approving
saying.
anything, we're just giving if we come to a consensus tonight, we're just only giving approval to explore the possibility.
Exploring, including
Because
appraisals.
if there's no land to be acquired at a cost that the council's willing to accept, then there's no way we can sell what we own, because then there's no
That's
place. We're not
correct.
going to be in my
Correct.
backyard.
I
Okay.
guess understood.
I guess what I need to know is a little bit more than that, Mary. Do we have is the council agreed
I'm going to ask that question.
that we need to
yes.
pursue something?
That was my first question. I just want to get clarity on all the information.
I think Brian needs to know that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the council, first off, to get a consensus if this is something we want to pursue in general, or are we willing to stay status quo with our current facilities and do minimal needed improvements as needed, as kind of the approach that they've been doing. A window replacement here or there, the roof when it's absolutely needed, but just to keep the facility operating as is. Can I have a consensus to do that? Those in favor of doing that, raise your hand. Keeping the facility operating with Band-Aid approach. We've got one. Okay. So there's no consensus to keep the facility the way it is. So now I'm looking to get a consensus of doing the 2.597 minimal renovation cost estimate of the facility as proposed by TRIA Architecture, which would bring it up to ADA and do the modifications with no expansion, but just updating the current facility on its site. Can I have a consensus to do that? No consensus. Okay. So we got one there, we got no. Then I've got number 3, the proposed expansion, which would be the master plan addition and renovation as shown by our architect tonight, where they would expand on the current plot of land, keeping our site as is, at the same location, but just modified. Can I have a consensus for that? 1. Okay. Then I have, and this is just to explore. We're not saying this is happening, okay? Then I'm looking for a consensus about exploring the possibility of relocating the facility and building new. Can I have a raise of hands for that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
May I make a comment on that?
Yes, please.
We're in an open meeting, and we're broadcasting numbers that we're receiving for contracts, numbers that we possibly may buy, maybe, a property, a certain, ownership has it. I think we are shooting ourselves in the foot from trying to get a good negotiated deal, because the public now knows that we possibly have an offer on our place for X, and we need to spend X amount of dollars on what it's going to cost to build. Anybody we're buying from should be using that information against us, and we may not get the best deal. That's just my opinion. Be careful how we're approaching this.
Tom?
Just a quick comment. If we do find a new location or wherever, say, find a new property, we'd have to still get a bond and increase taxes to pay for it. So regardless, either way, is an increase in.
Did you want to speak to that?
No, I'm just saying you may not have to get a bond if we do get the cannabis revenue.
I'd be in favor of that.
So there's down the road other possible revenue sources.
Correct.
But other things have to happen for that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the
But
fact that
we're
the
lucky.
community did not opt out opens the opportunity for that. But will the state issue the city of Darien a license, and will there be a company?
Well, they don't issue Darien a license, they issue.
Well, the
people that
company, will
apply.
there be a company that has applied and successfully received a license and then have a location to put said business is to be determined?
We'll know by June.
Okay,
Well, one correction though, Eric, I think we would still have to issue a bond regardless if you get the cannabis. If you get the cannabis,
Yeah,
now
but we
you
wouldn't have to
have the
raise
funds to
taxes.
be able to pay it.
We don't have to raise taxes, that's the point I was making.
well, you'll have to get a bond initially to get the project
That's
going.
correct, but you don't have to raise taxes to pay for the bond.
Yeah, the only thing, Mary, I'm just thinking about this now too. I wanted to hear, the direction, but we still need to go through the capital projects budget, because if you look out in that third year, you might have to do a bond for the project. So we should probably go through, go through the capital projects budget and then confirm everybody's opinions now, because you're weighing it now. You'll be weighing the public works against other projects we'll be talking about over the next several years.
Okay, but I still feel like we're not making any big decisions this evening because there's so many unknowns, in terms of what would be happening.
Well, the only big decision I heard is there's only interest from one of the aldermen to do nothing. So, to me, that's monumental. We're getting some consensus that we should do something. So we're to the point, I think, where doing nothing is off the table, whereas up until now, doing something was off the table. So that's pretty monumental to me.
Right, but everyone, once we get more information presented to us about property values, land acquisitions, land sales, I sense that other people here might go back to some of the other areas that they might not have said yes to regarding meaning a rehab or a modification on the current
Right,
site.
but
Yeah.
but not do nothing. I'm not hearing that.
No,
So
it sounds like
okay.
you have an
Yeah.
overwhelming majority to pursue
Right. Right.
a future change. Okay? Okay, we are going to then dive into, unless anyone wants to take a break, grab something to drink, eat, snack, okay? We will dive into capital projects. I do have, Brian handed me a updated,
Since the
updated sheet is going around, Brian, if you want
Okay,
to give it a
thanks.
minute.
Yeah,
That's
since-
dated, March 3rd.
Okay, and I did, we're updating these sheets as numbers come in, as different things, and the handout is an update to the Capital Projects Fund.
122 it is.
So I'm looking on page 121, 122, under capital projects.
And that cover sheet, there's a couple changes, but primarily, now that the council has talked about items in the general fund, and increased expenses slightly, or not slightly, I guess depends on increased expenses, the transfer into the capital projects fund over the next few years, in order to keep our 3 months fund balance, I reduced in the 21 request from 2.8 to 2.6, and in the fiscal year 22 forecast from 1,750,000 to 1,650,000. So that's a change, with less money in the capital projects fund. The positive item is in year 3, we're able to reduce the road project in the capital projects fund because we are now receiving an increase in our MFT funds, which I handed out last week, but we have not yet talked about it. So the MFT funds will get an additional and it's already started, but about 260,000 now every year in MFT. And as everybody knows, the MFT funds are to be used only for expenses authorized by the state. And with sometimes when we use MFT funds, there's the regulations are more than we might have to follow normally. So that might drive up the road project maybe 12% that year. But we were able to put in year 3 $1 million by saving that increment over 3 years. And again, the net effect of those things are the original forecast for fiscal year 23 for the capital projects fund of a fund balance was about 371,000, and that now is about 877,000. Not what we need going to next year, but at least it's a positive impact, recognizing the extra MFT revenue. So that's the overview, and I think we could, as we've done in the other budgets, probably start talking about the projects themselves, unless there's any questions on.
Does anyone have
Overview.
questions for Brian on the oversheet? Okay. Well, then I'm going to start referencing page 123, which is the summary pages. Okay, starting off with capital project 25-35-4376, stormwater ditch projects. There's backup in several of these areas. The R&R rear yard drainage project. Public Works drainage projects, there's different numbers listed. Is there any discussion on the total amount of $441,150? Supporting documents are on pages 125, 26, 27, and so on.
Can you just give a high-level recap of these, Dan?
Sure, I'll just do it real quick. All 8 of these projects, a couple projects have been really, over the last 2-3 years, have been maintained. When I say maintained, whether the pipes were jetted, cleaned out, some catch basin work, a lot of this infrastructure that's in place is inferior due to the construction methodology, number one. Number two, the material itself. The material in many cases was a 4-inch corrugated pipe that is many locations, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, full of roots. The pipe was not of a higher quality that we use today, referred to as HDPE. So that's really it in a nutshell.
And these are the projects that are our responsibility.
That is correct. They are storm sewers. They are storm sewers, just smaller storm sewers or drain. They're almost like rear yard drain projects that were put in place years ago through DuPage County. And all of these are areas that have been annexed to the city.
Chris, question to you. We approved a camera. With that camera, will we be able to detect more of these in the future? Are we going to see an expenditure like this in the future, or are we solving problems here where we won't have to see these problems again?
The
Or
camera
does it
won't,
stop?
yeah, the camera won't go down to 4-inch. So most of the problems that we find where they're the 4-inch is, based on resident call-ins. So again, I think those pop up every, unfortunately every year. It seems like more and more are coming to light. And I think it's just, you get the storm sewer structure itself doesn't have like a poured concrete bottom. So it's just some concrete rings basically set on top of mud. And what's going to happen, they're going to fill up with mud and roots. So, that's the majority of what we're seeing with these smaller ones in the rear yard. Haven't seen too many bigger sizes that we'd be able to camera. So
Yeah, I think as I said before, 3 of these were somewhat of problem childs several years ago. We just been trying to maintain them. Recently, more have been identified last year. So over the course of this budget season, all of those became a larger conglomeration of the, what you see here is the A project. Moving forward, we really haven't seen any more that's, I think, are going to be identified. Will they come up? There might be a couple more. How many? Maybe 3 next year, maybe none. Over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, I can average, personal average would be about 2 per year.
Well, I see in the fiscal year '22 forecast, it's got $869,000. And then nothing for '23.
It might be for,
Yeah, those are for the the actual ditch projects. If you look there, there's 3 projects, but they're not on our books until fiscal year '22. And those are the projects that you're seeing in the second year of the 3-year budget. Those are more expensive, and those are our regular front yard, the ditch projects that
Okay.
we did not include this year because the timing with the roads isn't such that
Okay.
we have to do those.
So that's just to finish the miles that we were trying to finish up.
correct,
Help finish the 27 miles.
correct.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, right, and
Okay.
I believe we're at 95% completion. With that 95% completion, we did go out to bid, so the numbers were plugged in for this year's budget. And again, staff feels really there's no reason to rush these projects and get them done, just for the simple reason that the pricing was okay, nothing spectacular, number one. Number two is that we're not repaving these roads for another couple of years.
Okay.
But Mary, you are right. In year 3, we did not identify any projects, and if Dan starts seeing more projects come up over this year, we would have to fill something in. When we're sitting here next year at this time, we can fill, we'd have to put a number in there.
Okay. And when I look at this, the 441,000 and all these, there's a lot of addresses and streets and stuff. Do we have a lot more areas in Darien? I mean, I guess what percentage of the rear yard drainage areas that we're in charge of does this show? I mean, I guess, is
As
that?
far as a percentage, maybe 1%, but, when you look at a lot of these other rear yards, you'll see the construction methodology is of larger pipes, concrete pipes, structures that are, solid concrete, that aren't going to basically fall apart unless there's a washout, and that's where this camera, from a maintenance standpoint, will be able to go and say, okay, there's a joint that's blown out here, there's a weep hole here for whatever reason. So,
I think Mary's trying to find out how much in dollar amount we are going to
left.
expect to pay over
Yeah.
X amount of years, Dan.
I
Whether-
don't see, I don't see it anywhere in this amount. Like I said, I would average.
Consider this like a big year.
Right.
Whereas in
Especially for
future
this-
years, maybe not so much.
Yeah, this I would say is an anomaly.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Okay.
But essentially, we're not, based on what Brian's saying, we're not budgeting anything for those in the next 2 years.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because we haven't identified any.
Okay.
Yeah.
These are all the ones that are on,
But you're already
That
saying
we're
that
currently
you wouldn't
aware
expect
of.
it to be that amount, but it could be half of that. So you're already saying that it could be.
won't say
I
not
thought you
half.
said that it could be,
averaging about 2. So take any two, take
You're
any-
right, though, Mike. Yeah, I'm not including any more. And obviously, prior to these changes, the capital projects budget you wouldn't have been able to afford those
support it,
without
obviously.
something. So I'm not going to include those until such a time that we have to and the council decides and we collectively look at funding mechanisms. So no, I did not put any of those in.
But just as a side note, every time we do a road, Mary, we go through there and look at all the storm
Right.
sewers, and we fix those storm sewers. Those are very, very minimal costs. So we're ahead of the state, we're ahead of the program, if you want to call it a program, whatever the case is,
Right.
for maintenance.
You're not going to go back and do it and disrupt the road and all that?
Right.
Okay, they kind of go hand in hand?
Yes.
Okay, and we've done most of the roads?
Yeah,
Oh.
yes.
Or not the roads, the ones that were identified? Okay. Any more questions on the stormwater ditch projects? Okay, if there's no objection, I'm going to move on. Sidewalk replacements for $188,750. There's supporting documentation starting on page 157.
my question is, last year it was 154,000. Is it due to price increases or we're doing a higher volume? Or
Pricing,
it's about a
some
20%,
pricing
it's about a
increase.
20% increase?
There is some pricing increase, and in addition to,
There's more.
I think the actual square footage went up a little bit too. We're finding just more and more with the tree, a lot of, some of the mismatches that we're seeing are, caused by tree roots.
Yep.
And that, sometimes you get the same squares that were, replaced a few years before pop up again because the tree roots, no matter even if the contractor gets them out of the way, the tree roots grow back. So,
Understand, just
so we're
wondering why
running
the
into,
increase.
yeah, a little bit more in order to make sure we can get as many, of the problems addressed.
along with the ADA,
Yeah.
we got about 3,000 square feet of ADA we're looking at starting to replace again, just go through all the existing ADA. Some of the guidelines have changed, number one. Number two, the ADAs that are in place are currently deteriorating. It's just the nature of it. And Alderman Kenny, I know, had brought an issue back to us of where he wanted staff to look at additional crossings. Again, we have not pursued that with an entire inventory, so I'm not sure if you want to comment any further on that. Our approach has been to take a wait-and-see approach. I know that the location that you gave us was somewhat of a difficult and a little more expensive than out of the ordinary, so I don't know if you want to
And it's
comment.
not something, I had gotten a communication from a resident, I can't recall the resident now, but, wheelchair capacitated, resident, wanting to go near Birchwood Park, and there's no real way of them because they get to the end of a sidewalk and there's nothing there to the other side. And I didn't think it was, that much, knowing we had the concrete programs going on, that's why I just thought I'd ask and see if there's anything we can do, if there's any spots within the city. I wouldn't say to do every spot, but if there's anything, I'll say strategic, park, school, house of worship of whatever, grocery store situation where somebody, is disabled and it needs, wheelchair accessible to those kinds of things. We talk about ADA all the time. Just want to know if there's anything we could, possibly do in that nature.
I mean, the answer is yes, but the problem is that it may be another 400 feet that they may have to go before they get to that location because of the potential cost of directly doing that may not be worth the expense, is all I'm saying. And in your particular case, I know we had a fire hydrant, we had a storm sewer, and we had a tree, a larger type of tree, which again was all in the way. And again, we have an opportunity for those crosswalks, and again, we'll look at it, we'll revisit that one, but we didn't go in inventory the entire town. There's no need, we felt there was no need for that. Well, I'm sorry, we did inventory it, but just based on the inventory, is there really a need for that? We're not having that many calls where we can't cross the street here. So
Got
we
one.
Tom?
Just a quick comment. I was talking to an ex-alderman, I guess maybe 20 years ago. There was a kid that was killed in Darien for not having enough sidewalks. He was walking across the street or along the street, and so there was a parking program for stickers to pay for the new sidewalks in town. And over time, that sort of went away. But we did have someone that passed away from lack of sidewalks. So that's Mr. Gillespie. Alderman Gillespie, that was previously my ward, was mentioning that to me, that there was a program like 20 years ago where we sold Darien stickers, and that helped fund sidewalks.
Stickers for the cars? you mean?
Correct.
Cars? Oh.
And we had a
Vehicle
child that was hit. He was walking across the side of the road, and money was spent to put in more sidewalks, and that sort of went away. But
I haven't had vehicle stickers since I've been here, and
I think
Yeah.
it was discontinued in either 95 or 98.
yeah, it was a long time ago. He was telling me the history because I brought up sidewalks
We don't
before.
know. If we made them mandatory, then you'd probably make a lot of money, but
Yeah.
right now we just give the money to
Correct.
local
But-
nonprofit organizations.
But the reason for that was someone was hit.
But every year we read the history about when council eliminated them, so I,
Okay, now I was talking about safety. You know, you mentioned about safety going across sidewalks, and you mentioned there's no concerns. And 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we did have someone that got killed because they had to go on the road because of lack of sidewalks. That's all I'm bringing up. So,
I don't remember getting many requests from residents to put sidewalks into areas without sidewalks.
we had, I don't know, 8 years maybe, I think, John Podorowski was on the council, and, some areas do come in with a sidewalk request, and at that time, the council expressed that if a larger neighborhood wanted sidewalks, there would be a special service area to pay for those. But again, not everybody wanted them, and I think that's what we found out as you go through this. It's like a street light. 3 people might come in and want it, and then when you put it in, you'll find out that some people don't want it. And it's the same with sidewalks. Not everybody wants it, but the funding was, again, through a special service area. That's what was discussed. If everybody's familiar with that, it's basically a separate tax of those residents that are benefiting specifically from that project would pay for that. But it's been a long time since that came up.
want to bring in young residents, and a lot of them look at sidewalks and walkability as being a very important decision or things they look at for the city. So I understand, asking the property owner, but also too, we got to look towards the future of newer residents.
I'm just giving the
coming in.
history.
Yeah.
It's up to the council. If the council wanted to fund new sidewalks, then you'd have to discuss with them. I'm just saying, giving you the history, when this request came up before in Marion Hills, one of the areas, that was the discussion by the council.
Okay.
Way back in my days when I was in the plan commission too, we used to stress about that all the time. You'd have a new development, fine, let's put sidewalks in, but then they wouldn't connect to anything. And then some residents would come, you get 2 or 3 residents together, we want a sidewalk here, and the adjoining 2 or 3 neighbors didn't want the sidewalk. So now you got 3 houses with it, and then drops off in the grass after that. There was just no consistency and no consensus on what people wanted. Seems like people either want them or don't want them, and rarely do you get the whole group together that wants it. And if you could, then I would think that something could probably be done, but
Okay.
we always found it extremely difficult.
So if we had a program that if residents did want it, and they had a line of people that wanted to do it, then there at least a process to go that route then. Maybe that's something.
Well,
A formal process. Like for the lights, for example, you talk to 4 people around, and if they agree to
Yeah,
it, then we
th-
put
so
it
the-
in. But we don't have a formal process for sidewalks that's advertised on.
No, we do
Darien.
for the lights, it's $2,500. I mean, a sidewalk program in a neighborhood could cost $1 million. I don't know, Dan, $500,000, $1 million.
It
So
depends on the length of it, and we've applied for several grants over the course of the year. Safe Routes to School is the most familiar, most recent one, and we didn't get the funding for that. That was along 79th Street, for example. So, unless the city council wants to start to allocate certain dollars for sidewalks, similar to the streetlight program, meaning.
But that does no good, obviously, Dan, unless it's done collectively. You don't want to.
Oh, I
do
agree.
Exactly what Mike said. So
Just saying, if you put in, 50,000 into a kitty, and it's okay, and let's say the value of that is 50,000, and everyone on the block says yes, I mean, sure, that's a new program or policy that could be started, but you also need to have full or majority of the people on that block saying, yes, we want the sidewalk. We've seen on these rural sections. People just don't want to change the rural section in some cases.
Hypothetically speaking, if there was some way we could apply for some kind of grant, I'm not saying there is one out there and or not, and we were able to be fortunate enough to get it, and we decide, okay, area A is we're gonna use this grant for the sidewalks there. 10 residents on that block, 6 want it, 4 doesn't. Even though we'd still put the sidewalks in, right? If we had the money for free, basically.
That would
we
be
had
your
them-
decision.
Right.
That wouldn't be ours. We would bring,
Right.
if the council would, that's 100% your decision in that case. Now, if Dan mentioned the grants for the safe school, that was something it's been a while, I don't know if those grants are still there. That was specific on sidewalks near the school, but, it would be, the council would still need to decide if you want 4 people to be upset and 6 not upset. I mean, that would be your
I think Joe's
decision.
question was, you could say this whole block's going to have sidewalks, and even if people want it or
Oh,
not,
you can,
they get the
yeah.
sidewalk.
It's the city's right of way and responsibility to make that determination, yes.
'Cause if
Yeah,
it's-
there's $40 billion in infrastructure money that Pritzker has allocated in this year's budget. And there has not been a discussion as to how municipalities are going to get that, but that money's supposed to go back into, and I don't know if it's major roads and bridges. I think most of it probably will be that, but there will be money there for municipalities to have projects completed. But that's going to be something that's down the road. I don't think we can ever count on any of that money. So I think grants are really kind of out of the question now. But who knows? Maybe somewhere down the line, maybe we'll be able to get some of that money.
Sure, because we still have identified sidewalks that make sense of where they should go.
Okay.
Okay, well, are we good to move on?
Please.
Everyone? Okay. So that's $188,750 for sidewalk replacements. Crack seal program, you can see the backup on page 158 for the amount of $189,239. Any questions?
I'm also going to talk about just that, and the curb and gutter, the next two. They've gone up by anywhere between 10 and 15%. Again, expansion or just cost increases?
Expansion on the crack fill, so what we're starting to do now is the crack fill program is designed to be basically targeting areas at intervals of 3, 6, 9, potentially 12 years. So now we've almost at full cycle with a road that was done back almost 12 years ago, extending the life of the road to the 15-year point. So it's intervals of 3 years, and now we have additional roads that have reached at 9 going to 12 or 12 to 15, in which case there's an increase in materials. The curb and gutter, the concrete is slightly up. Again, the concrete is also, curb and gutter is based off of the roadways on a percentage, and with the amount of roads that have curb and gutter this year on them, that's how that's basically worked out with a magical formula. We've been running about either flat on a year-to-date budget for curb and gutter or slightly low. I haven't seen us really go over on anything.
You good there? Okay. Any more questions on that? Bond payment, $194,427. Okay. Capital improvements infrastructure, we got some natural area conversion projects. And that backup can be found starting on page 160. Any questions on those areas?
Mary, just to clarify,
Yes.
those are specific projects that we have a identified revenue source specifically for what Dan refers to as best practices for detention basins and things. So we have this money that we've collected over time, and you can only use it for specific things, and this is what Dan's identified for the limited uses we have for that money.
Is there a timeline when we have to use that money up by?
That is correct. There's a 10-year shelf life on the monies, otherwise the funds need to be returned. I know we had discussed this item at the Public Municipal Services. We would like to move forward with this project. We also got a consensus from the Municipal Services Committee. With that said, the responses were rather low. Regardless, that'll be all coming back to City Council for the first-party engineering.
So our goal is not to return any of the money.
Correct. Our
Right.
goal is to move
Okay.
forward with these projects, and one of the projects in here is Holly Park. Alderman Kenny's very familiar with Holly Park, and, this is one way of mitigating some of the concerns between the Park District and the city of Darien. with who's responsible for what. So this is along the same methodology of the native plannings.
Any more questions on those areas? Okay, moving on. We already discussed the Public Works building renovation construction. There's anything more we need to do on that, Dan or Brian, at this point? With all the backups starting at page 174?
And there's a zero there, so, no, I'm just
And
kidding.
the big X at the bottom? Under
Mr.
no,
Vanna.
that looks like you.
Yeah, we have direction
Were
on the
you
building.
in anger
You know, and
management
again-
therapy when you were doing that?
An awful big X.
The X was bigger. He made it smaller.
That's pretty big. And it wasn't even done with a Sharpie, it was done with a pen several times. Okay.
With a lot of pressure.
Okay, like I said, I thought I might have to sit between you two lads tonight, but I'm glad you behaved yourself. Okay. Moving on to street reconstruction and rehab. Street maintenance, page 190. 1,428,400. 400, I mean, 1,428,400. Any questions on that?
That's a bid price, Dan, so that's a
That
good
is the
number.
bid price. We're all set to go, approximately 5.0 miles of roadway. Again, that schedule will be presented shortly.
Nice.
Good pricing this year.
Question, as we've exchanged emails, I'm sure other aldermen, I'm new, so I've been asked this question, when's my street going to get done? I know that there's a plan, why my street hasn't been done in 20 years, which is, but people want to know. So is that on the public domain somewhere where people can look up their street, when it was done and when it will be done, and when the plan is? Or is that just something they have to inquire?
Typically, we have them inquire because it's a rolling catalog and it changes annually.
Okay.
I mean, if we put it on there, even if someone was to look at it, they may be a little bit confused by some of the nomenclature that's utilized in there. So we'd rather have them call, and we'll be more than happy to, explain it to them.
Okay.
But I think we will, now that you brought that up, we should, I'm going to talk to Metro Strategies to put something out, at least so residents have an idea of the process, whether or not they look at their individual road, they'll know how there's a great
methodology.
process. Yeah, so we methodology, so we'll get that to Metro and make sure they're getting that word out.
We used to give the aldermen a road catalog.
We have it.
We do.
We had it, the
We have a
city
new
divided.
one, right.
But now because I have that road catalog, and I used to reference that when I had a resident who called me, but that is outdated. That's what you're saying.
No, it's dated, it's up to date. We just have to print them at this point. It's just been put on our M
That
drive,
would
and I
love to
believe.
have it.
Yeah.
Not sure, I don't, Eric, did I give you?
Yeah, I looked at one, I didn't keep it though.
That wasn't the most recent
No, that wasn't
one.
the
Right,
most
that's
recent,
when we were
right.
still working on, so
Eric
it's up
Trout-
again.
Eric
That'll
I
be
got
up.
mine's from 2014 when I first got it. When I first got it.
And I don't even need a hard copy. If you just wanted to give me a
No, we'll
PDF,
email
let's save
them.
some trees. I mean, email, yeah, we could just look it up. That would be great.
That's fine.
And I do feel that the crack seal program gets a lot of, because it's just not pretty, but it has a purpose. It does get a lot of bad press. People think it's ugly, not realizing, so I think Metro Strategies could do a little, show it some love and explain to people
Yep.
that, it really does save the city a lot, maybe put a dollar amount to it, that it saves the city by us making that investment.
Oh, sure it does. If it averages about $150,000 per year over a course of 3 years, so you got almost $500,000 that you have the opportunity to save. And not to save time, we did put a report together, and I just have to resurrect that report and put it back out to the officials and or the website what it actually does, and it's a proven document.
Right, no, that'd be great. And I think we just need to give it a little press, because in my ward, we get a lot of street envy when people get new streets. The people that don't have the new streets want the new streets.
What do you
So
mean?
I'm just sharing it. I'm out there, okay? Okay. Any discussion on street reconstruction? Okay, moving on, consulting services. Go back up, street engineering road cores testing. Next page, 124, street engineering bid prep. And more of that, engineering, okay? Can I have any opposition to the budget? The capital projects fund budget. Are we good with that?
Mike, can you point out again, I know you've done this, but I think now that we've recapped the Public Works building, we've gone through, could you just do that talk on the fund balance in the third year and what if we had a fourth year here? If that's okay, Mary, I think
Oh, no,
now
I
that we've
think
finished
that's-
that, it's probably good to
I think
recap
that's a
that.
good thing.
I think they're tired of hearing from me on this one.
I would
Okay,
agree.
yeah. Especially,
Yeah, me too.
The money man.
Well, now, as we talked about really in the first meeting, I did the bird's eye view overlooking things, and Brian passed out the updated list now, the capital projects fund. And if you go out with, based on the reduced transfers from the general fund, you see before it was $371,000, the balance in the capital projects fund the third year out. Now you see it's been improved to $877,000 in spite of the fact that we've spent, that we've actually increased a lot of our expenses and reduced the amount transferring from the general fund. So it's much healthier than it was at our first meeting, which was 371, so we're about $500,000 to the good. But as Brian indicated before, it's not playing with smoke and mirrors, but he is using the MFT funds for doing the street improvements in that third year. I guess I do have one question on that, Brian. Is that a one-time shot, or is that going to be an annual amount?
Annual, yeah,
It
it's
is an
built
annual,
into the tax code in Illinois now, so
Okay.
we can count on that until there's a change in the law.
Okay, but again, you can see that generally we're spending probably between $2 and $3 million in your typical expenses in the capital improvement fund for street, for seal coating, for the crack seal program, and for the various projects here. And again, not budgeting for anything like we talked about, the $200,000 for these special ditch projects. Nothing's been budgeted for there. So once you get to the third year, you've only got a balance of $877,000. And again, if we're, I guess what you're getting to, if we're spending between $2 and $3 million on these typical on your average typical capital projects on an annual basis, by the time you get to the third year out, you're going to be short that 2 or 3 million once you get into that next year, and you're going to need to generate more revenue one way or another. As you're tying in the new public works facility, possibly if you do a 15-year bond, and we're talking or a 20-year bond, $15 million bond, I'm sorry, and we're looking about a $1 million annual expense. Again, barring, I don't want to count on the taxes from the marijuana. But if you're looking at $1 million there, you need another $1 million just to cover that. So you could potentially be $2-3 million short per year. $2 or $3 million, if you translate it into Brian's projections based on the bond issue, every $1 million we generally need about $100 per year in whether it's some sort of revenue. If you do it strictly with real estate taxes, it would be about $100 a year. So if we need $3 million a year for capital projects, it would equate to about $300 per year for the typical household, just for maintaining what we're doing. You can't go out and do a bond issue every time you're doing streets. You don't want to do it that way, but just for keeping our maintenance where it is. That ignores the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with police pension. These numbers have been going up. As I indicated in the first meeting, the police pension, our real estate taxes are going to be going up that third year just to cover that amount. As you recall, it was like $1.9 million, or no, it was $2.3 million that third year. Right now, we're collecting about $2.2 million in real estate taxes. So we've been using all of our real estate taxes for covering the police pension fund. By the time we get to year 3, we're going to have to increase our taxes just to cover that, aside from anything separate that we're talking about in capital projects, assuming the numbers project out again based on the actuarial reports and everything else. But I think, is that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect, Mike. And again, it's not a surprise, so, we've seen that trend. But just to clarify, Mike, if there was a 20-year bond for $1 million only, that would increase your tax $11 a year. For just $1 million of a bond issue.
Oh, of a bond, okay.
Yes, so if you needed $1 million 1 year, that's what it would cost in the scenario, just to clarify.
Okay, so yeah,
Okay.
so if you're doing $3 million, so it'd be about $30 or $40
Yeah,
per
yeah.
year for the typical
Yes.
household, assuming we do it just with real estate taxes.
Yeah.
Now, there's other directions you can go with that too, obviously, but just to try and translate into the dollars. There will be additional dollars needed in year 4, barring any big surprises from any additional revenue sources we might be getting. I've got to also mention, I met with the auditors today, and I've got to compliment our city accountant, Julie Sains, and she's been doing a great job. She's been finding a lot of, not a lot, but certain revenue that hasn't been collected, that should be collected, as we're just being more aggressive with it. You may not have realized, but last night you approved something that allows us to, for people that have unpaid parking tickets, for instance, we've been sending those to a collection agency. Well, a collection agency for a $25 parking ticket, you can imagine how much attention we're getting on something like that from the collection agency. Basically nothing. Well, this is allowing us to work with the state, send out a notice, but if people don't pay it, where the state would actually lien and take the money from a tax refund they might be having and bring it back to us. Collection agency, we've been paying them 50% of anything they collect. Again, not much that they've been collecting, but this we get to keep 100% of it. So you approved that last night. May not have noticed it just based on the wording, sort of innocuous in there, but that's going to be an improvement. Again, that's due to Julie's contribution there. So I think she's been doing a great job. I've been trying to compliment her, but I know she works behind the scenes, isn't looking for any good press or anything, but she's really been doing an outstanding job identifying certain areas where we've had weaknesses there and trying to collect what's really due us. There was one situation where one resident had 20 parking tickets and his wife had 20 parking tickets. And since we weren't sending follow-up notices, collection wasn't contacting them, just totally ignoring them. She sent out just some follow-up letters, made back the postage within the first day. She sent out on that. So again, I do want to compliment her in public because she has been doing a great job. And I think I've been communicating that with Brian, but a lot of you don't really deal with her on a day-to-day basis. And I just want to let you know I'm very pleased with what she's been doing. She gets her reports out very quickly after the end of the month, does the monthly accounting, and looks for things that should be improved on and takes the initiative. And I really respect that and appreciate a lot of her.
Can I get some
Very
accolades,
innovative.
Mike?
I'm sorry.
Can I get some accolades as well?
Yeah, someday just tell me what you've done.
You'll get accolades, you just won't get any.
Oh,
you
boy.
won't-
Settle down, gentlemen.
You'll get accolades, damn it, you just won't get any money.
Mary, that
Julie's
answers
great.
all
What
the
do you
questions
want?
I had.
Okay, that's everything, guys? Can we move on to enterprise fund? Yeah, Julie's doing a great job. Kudos to her, for sure. Okay, so we will move into enterprise fund budget, which is water fund revenue budget, water fund revenue, water depreciation fund budget. Okay? Okay. We are looking at page 191.
This, Brian, I guess before we get started here, on the fiscal 19 actual, I know I brought that up to you, I think it was just a transposition
Yes.
error on the cash balance, the 2,473,000 is what my report showed, and that's probably what everybody has in their hands. It was a minor change,
Yeah.
but it should have been 2,437,000, so the number will be reduced by about $35,000 rolling forward. It was just a transposition error in that column.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, Mike. Anything else from you on this particular budget, fund?
Yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit more.
Please.
Inspection tap-on permits, again, revenue side, it's the positive in this case. Brian has shown 14,753. I showed 18,203 as of the end of January. And other water sales, though, we're projecting 21,000, and it was only $72 through the end of January. But I think that might have a lot to do with the annual billing that we send through Woodridge and that.
I just have to check. Those might have just been put in water sales. Mike, I will have to check that.
Okay. That's all I have on that page.
Okay. Brian, do you have anything to add on
Well,
this?
thanks, Mary. In summary, there's no increase to the water rate. Every year, we kind of look at if we need maybe a quarter onto the rate per thousand, but I'm finding we don't need that. And as we get into the expenses, Chris has been recommending we're doing a larger meter replacement program. That should help the revenues. So at this point, I don't have any recommended increase for this upcoming year.
Chris, is there anything you'd like to share with us on this budget?
I think at the expense side, Mayor, right, when you get through the expenses, we'll probably
Okay,
have more
great.
there.
Well, we'll get started then. Under the revenue, is there any questions on the revenue side of the water fund budget summary? The fiscal year 21 requested amount is showing a revenue of $7,546,000. I'm sorry, $7,546,346. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to start looking at the Water Department summary page, data number 193, as we look at expenses. We've got salaries. Any questions on salaries? And along with salaries, there's benefits. Okay, going down to operating.
I'm sorry, can I back up just one
Yeah,
second?
absolutely.
I just noticed I just turned the page. I was backtracking on something. The salaries are reflected at 646, Brian, compared to 563 last year. And up either 9.5% based on actual or 15% based on last year.
I'll just have to check that, Mike.
Hey, question for you. So, this is water fund, and it looks like the overtime came as requested. We've had a pretty light year weather-wise, so I would have thought the overtime would be down. Yes, no.
No, we do a lot in the summertime for overtime as well. I mean, that's going from watering sod to cutting grass, and so if these guys from the water department are staying late, that's where they're getting paid from, even if they may potentially be doing a street department job. So the guys, they're constantly putting in after hours to keep up with the workload.
Chris, what about the water main breaks? That's
Yeah,
obviously
water
a
main
large
breaks.
thing.
Yeah, water main breaks, fixing hydrants.
Right.
But again, that's all the way back from May of last year. So no, it hasn't really slowed down. It never really does.
I've also noticed Joanne usually does payroll, and a lot of our snowstorms this year, interestingly enough, the snow's been less, but a lot of it's been over the weekends.
Yeah. Right.
And weekends, it triggers double time in terms of the overtime.
Yeah, any emergencies on the weekends are double time for our guys. So yeah, I know it seems, but again, you get into these, and you may not be as cold a stretch, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the events are decreasing. So they're still out.
I just thought we had a light.
Yeah, the durations have
Knock on
not
wood.
been there, but the frequencies have been.
And also the amount of snow you're getting for snowstorms, for example, you're not getting a lot of snow, but the snow is taking the storm itself is lasting substantially longer than we've seen in the past. So you get in order to get 2 inches of snow, you're talking in some of these instances, it's snowing for a day. I mean that's ridiculous, honestly. But you have to basically almost staff it for almost the entire time. I mean because we're trying to maintain that level of service that the residents have come to expect from us. So.
Since we're talking salaries, how many personnel are we talking about that fall under this particular allocation?
I can answer that. I just want to open that spreadsheet.
7, isn't it?
I believe it's 6 full-time general utility workers, the foreman, and then part of my salary comes out of there as well.
Okay. Just to quantify it.
Is that right, Brian? And then there's some of our seasonal employees get paid out of the water fund as well.
And do you ever go back and evaluate, like, maybe we need to add one more seasonal employee because we're finding ourselves not too much work, not enough manpower, we're going into overtime? Maybe if we added one more, 18-year-old boy to cut more grass, that it would cost us less?
The answer is yes, we do. Finding part-time help is more difficult today than it ever was.
I know.
Last year, we did put on another full-time water employee.
One other thing in that regard, and maybe we need to look at this. I mean, I know everybody's talking about the minimum wage going up to $15. I know our part-time summer help has been at $10 an hour starting for as long as I've been here, I think. I don't know if increasing that at all would help in terms of recruiting those people. But again, just a thought. I know it's just been at that same amount, and then it goes up a quarter a year, I think, to $10.25 and $10.50.
I would say it wouldn't hurt, when you're driving down the road and you see a sign in front of Bona Beef that says up to $14 an hour. I mean, I could go make $10 an hour and be outside, potentially. Somebody might like that.
Teenagers don't like manual labor. That's the sad fact.
Or you could be inside an air-conditioned restaurant, you may be in the kitchen portion, yeah, it's hot back there potentially, but, for potentially $14 an hour, I mean, you could do the math if you're a college kid or something like that, trying to get the most bang for the limited amount of time you got home,
But I've been here 13 years now, and I know it's been
Yeah,
the same amount.
When I first started as a seasonal helper, I think it was 98 or 99. It was $7 an hour. After my first year, it went up to $10 an hour, and it's been the same since. So that's over 20 years ago.
Do you just suggest paying more money?
Epiphany.
I think he's gonna apply for it.
Cut Chris's
Mike's retired. He wants to have a little extra
After
cash.
I'm
in his
done with
pocket.
budgets, I have
Okay.
nothing left to do.
Last night, he wanted to build a sign.
I tell you. Maybe it's my influence on him. Not. Okay. Any other questions on operating? We're going to make our way down. We already talked before about the, if there's anything up above between, in account 50-4219, but the AED equipment and training, we had discussed that earlier under municipal services. This is the cost as it relates to the water department. Okay. Moving on more to page 194, operating continued, 50-4223, maintenance building.
I just had one quick question on that then. I see septic maintenance, $1,000. I thought when Sterling Bay went in, we tied into the sewer system.
We're not tied in yet. We have the infrastructure in place, and our staff is going to be doing that within the next couple months.
Next account, 50-4225, maintenance equipment. Okay, I'm going to move on until I hear opposition. 50-4231, maintenance water system. 50-4233, postage, mailings. 4241, quality control. Okay, turning the page to 195, more of operating. Supplies.
Quick one, ink cartridges, toner, $22.50 versus $1,000. Dan's smiling, so
I give up. I can't. In cartridges, these are for the larger, I know these are for the larger plotters.
They cover all of our printers, so some instances, I don't know, but some instances, with the big plotters, if we're running a lot of prints, we may end up having to buy more.
I realize it has the expense. Have we been exceeding our budget on that, or why the big increase?
3,500, 42.
Books, Mike.
$22.50 versus $1,000. Have mine back.
I'd have to compare to last year, and maybe I put a 2%.
He'll get back to you, Mike. He's gonna look at it.
Okay. The 4263, training and education. 4267, telephone. Moving down to 4269, uniforms. 4271, utilities. 4273, vehicle, gas, oil. Okay. I'm going to move into contractual services. We've got the audit. Then we got consulting professional services. Leak detection. Data processing. DuPage Water Commission.
Just to note, out of the approximately 7 million in expenses, this is 4.5 million. It's the
That's
largest
huge.
part of the budget because we buy our water from DuPage Water Commission. It's always the
That's
largest.
the actual cost of the water.
Yes, and it's per 1,000 gallons they charge us, and I'm thinking the rate will be the same as it is currently at $4.97 1,000. So
When did they decide on that rate?
they do it every year.
Have they,
Yeah.
do we
Yeah.
know already? It's not.
Yeah, they have a tentative budget, which
Okay.
shows no rate increase. So we just got that information.
Well, the
within
Lake
last week.
Michigan water level's high, so they should start discounting it down to try to sell some.
Doesn't work like that.
I'll worry that.
Eric's going to go down with some buckets.
If I can back up
Yes.
one quick second, Dan, I had a question if we're backing up to the data processing, the county meter reading and billing. Now we're going with those smart readers, so once that happens, I know we've been paying the county about $26,000 every 2 months, which I know is what this is composed of. Once we get all those meters in going forward, would that disappear?
That will disappear, yes. Again, we're still about 2 years out. We're still working with the county and trying to iron through some RFP details.
But Mike, that money might get contributed to the actual the way these meters read. We're replacing meters, but you still need a read system that Dan and Chris have been working with like 3 or 4 other governmental entities. So it might, we don't know if that, while that expense might go away, it might come in another form to pay for part of the automated system.
And only a portion of that may go all the way away because you still have to pay somebody to bill unless we're going to hire somebody.
Yeah, there's a couple
and buy
different things
software.
we're looking at. We charge, so there will be some reduction. What it is, we don't have a total reduction yet.
So yes, as Brian pointed out, the DuPage Water Commission, the cost of the water is the most significant part of the budget at $4,544,305. Okay, equipment. We're going to flip the page to 196. Page number 196. We've got a couple items here that have backup.
I got a question on this.
Some trucks,
Yeah, I'd like to have a
trailer.
question on the truck for the 31.5. But in the backup now, I think that's, the backup on 203 shows 62,000. But then the number on page 205 shows 36,000. What's the 62,000?
This is half of the amount you're looking at in water, right?
Oh, but is the full amount 62 grand?
Yes.
I could tell you. So what happened was originally when we started looking at it, the current vehicle is an Expedition. We could not find that vehicle on any of the purchasing contracts. And so we went with the next lowest down, which was an Explorer. When we came back to it, I looked in one more place and was able to find an Expedition. Again, you take certain options to go with it. But again, you don't have to. It's up to your guys' discretion as to which kind of vehicle you guys want us to drive.
But then I start looking at the detail behind the car here, and I can't come up to 62.
I'm not sure how we're,
The one that's there is for the Explorer. That's why you won't see the 62 on that. That's why you get the 38. So I think that when I upped it, it was right towards when I told Dan, hey, I did find the Expedition. I don't know that he got the backup for
okay.
the Expedition
Got it.
into here. I think that the backup that's in there is for the Explorer.
Chris,
and
that
that's-
contemplates alternate fuel vehicles still?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at.
Yeah, but do we really get any savings on that? I mean, alternate fuel is great, but if you're paying a huge premium for it,
Well,
it
that's
doesn't
what
pay
we're,
back.
that's what we're looking at. I don't know if
So,
you've.
yeah, there is no alternative fuel option for the Expedition unless you, I guess unless you did like a propane or a CNG in which you would have an outside vendor put, that dual fuel tank on there. There's nothing strictly straight from Ford. They're not E85 ready. Or anything like that. There is an option for E85 ready on an Explorer. There was also a hybrid option on the Explorer that you could go to, or again, you could be in a situation where you could look at doing a CNG or a propane on an Explorer. Issues with the CNG or propane would be fueling stations. So
I had asked Dan, when any purchase of any new vehicle, we should look at
Yeah,
alternative fuel.
I just think we can look at it as long as it pays back.
The
We
big
got
trucks,
payback on
the
it.
big trucks, I think we were looking at the Peterbilts, and I don't think that
there's an opportunity to get the CNG or the propane. The propane specifically, if you were to outright buy the system, it's about an $80,000 investment.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the cost of the propane fuel. There's another alternative where basically it's a lease base where the company comes in, sets up the system, and then you're obligated to buy the propane from them.
Dan, we were going to look at Downers Grove, and I think they have the CNG vehicles, and they were moving away from that.
These gentlemen went to Elmhurst. I'm not sure if Downers Grove ever got back to us.
Downers Grove never got back to us. Tom Masick, our mechanic, tried to contact them numerous times, no response back. We went to DuPage County Department of Transportation in Wheaton. We met with two gentlemen there about their CNG station. You know, mixed, you know, basically you have to have the buy-in from the operator. Originally, when they started buying them, they went strictly where the engine for the vehicle was CNG, so there was no other fueling option. Problem is for them, you drive the vehicle, let's say, to the far portion of the county, you maybe start doing a little bit of work, you got to get the truck back there, and otherwise, and if you run it out and can't get it to a CNG station before you do, you now have to have it towed because there's no other way getting it. So they went away from that, and what they ended up doing is now they're doing dual fuel vehicles. So it's a, you know, an unleaded pickup truck and with CNG capability as well. You have to have the buy-in from the operator because they have to flip the switch to run the CNG. If you don't get the buy-in from the operator, you wasted. They were paying for a pickup truck about $10,000 for that aftermarket upgrade. We also Dan had reached out through the mayors and managers conference, and we got a response back from Elmhurst that they're doing propane. I talked to their fleet supervisor. They're probably about $4,000 to $6,000 a vehicle for propane conversion. Again, they're doing the dual fuel capability. You know, he's, you know, both entities, you know, said, you know, the maintenance to a certain extent goes down. They're not doing oil changes as often. You know, maybe every third time they're bringing the vehicle in instead of every time that they're bringing the vehicle in. But when you get to the bigger, you know, milestones, you know, for, you know, a tune-up, you know, all the injectors have to be replaced. It was just because the fuels burn so much hotter. So, you know, what you're maybe saving on a $30 oil change, you're spending probably more on the, you know, tune-up. So I don't know that you save much in the maintenance. Now they did, you know, DuPage County, you know, with they went to the CNG on some of the vehicles. I think they started in 2010, 2011, if I remember right. And you know, I think they said they had one vehicle that had 250,000 miles on it, you know, when they finally got rid of it. Again, they're not doing any big vehicles, you know, they're not doing their, you know, 9, 11, 13-ton dump trucks. You know, they're not doing even 1-ton dump trucks. It's strictly, you know, strictly pickup trucks and some supervisor vehicles. They got a little bit of some of their fleet vehicles for, like, you know, maybe attorneys or whatever, you know, building department, but they can't get the buy-in from the police because on the CNG, the tank needs to go somewhere, and it's about it sticks out in the bed of a pickup truck. It consumes about 2 feet of the pickup bed, and it's the height of the pickup bed and in the full width of the pickup bed. So on a sheriff's, you know, on a deputy's, you know, squad car, they're not giving up the space in the trunk for a CNG tank. They just
So, yeah, and just in summary, what we'd probably do is recommend going to E85 on this Explorer, because the CNG is going to take up additional space, and we can get the E85 at the Speedway. The only concern is we have to keep manual records done for oil changes on the E85. It's about 40 cents a gallon cheaper. Is 40 cents without any additional taxes being taken off. So what does that come out to a year? Maybe a couple $1,000s at best in savings.
Environmentally, it's still a better fuel, so that sounds like a win-win because there's no cost to upgrade the engine.
So my question on this one is, you know, there's a big price difference between Explorer and Expedition. Do we really need the Expedition, or can we get away with the Explorer? I think what this is what comes down to. I mean, that's substantial.
Chris, what do you carry in the truck?
Price difference.
It's mostly, you know, paint, you know, some hand tools, nothing extravagant, but there are times where I'm putting the big signs in there if I need to go move them around. Again, it's not an everyday thing. I'm sure if I needed to, we could coordinate it, you know, with, you know, the guys or somebody else, you know. So again, I think all these vehicles, I think when you start looking at it personal or, you know, on, you know, when you're buying them for the, you know, city, the costs are quite extravagant, you know. So
the preferred choice has been
That
the
sticker
Expedition, right? The preferred choice has been Expedition, especially during, you know, wintertime, for example. And again, what we could do is, typically we've been very fortunate to be able to find these Expeditions through state purchase. For whatever reason, they're not there as available. So again, if we could have, somewhat earmarked for the expedition, and if the expedition is that expensive, we'll come back and there's no state purchase, there's no cooperative anywhere else. We'll come back and go with the Explorer, but the preferred has been the Expedition in the past for the Public Works.
Okay.
Any objections to that? Any questions on the trailer and the end loader bucket payload monitor system? Back up on pages 214, starting at 214, I should say, and 216.
And in a nutshell, what this is basically a scale that gets put onto the machine of the loader. So when we load semis, brokers, a broker can't tell us, okay, stop, I have enough on my load. We can more accurately say, you now have X amount of pounds, this is what you need to go out of here with. So at the end of the day, we're gonna save money by making sure that we have full capacity loads on the broker's semis that we're loading up.
Okay. Any discussion on water meters?
I assume these are the smart meters, is that what this is?
That is correct, and with the meters in general, I'm sorry, make sure I'm gonna write, 4880, 27,000?
4880, yes.
Right, that $27,000 at this point is only maintenance, but they are smart meters for the future, with the exception of the remotes. The remotes will need to be replaced when and if we go to this, what's referred to as the AMR system. Automated
The
meter
larger meter replacements in the next budget, the depreciation budget, that's where we could start with the, $500,000 stuff. So we'll hit that shortly.
Okay.
Any questions on the service charges for the transfers? 4251. Then we have debt retirement. Okay. Any further questions on the water department budget? Okay. We'll close that up and we will go to water depreciation fund budget, correct?
Yes, and you
Looking
can
at
see
page
that
219.
the major revenue here is just transfer from the water fund. We try to calculate rates so they generate sufficient surplus so we can reinvest into the water system. So based on the current scenario, in our 3-year plan, we end up with about $65,000 at the end of year 3, and really have a significant amount of improvements to the meter system, maybe the automated read. Anybody that's followed the water systems, there's been a lot of improvements to the system over the years. New towers, new valves, the way the system balances the computer. But now this is really, correct me, Chris, but really what's left is our meter replacement. So you'll see most of these expenses are gearing up for that.
Okay, Chris, anything to add on that?
No, I just think when you talk about the water meters, when you looked at the last budget, you're looking at, $4.5 million being what we're paying for the water. We want to make sure that we're accurately charging our customers, for what's going through their meter. And the way to do it is ensuring that you have accurate meters. So it is important.
Chris, question. We sell water at a higher rate to the Hinswood subdivision, correct? They get Darien water, but they pay more.
Unincorporated has a 20%.
Okay,
but
my question is, how do we gauge whether those meters are accurate? That's not Darien.
We can't guarantee them unless, DuPage County, who would potentially be a partner in this meter, project, is going in and replacing them. I mean, that's any place that you sell water to. I mean, you can't guarantee that they're meters. But again, we're basing it off of, you don't have a way.
And Mayor Marquez, there's a formula that within the unincorporated sections that's unaccounted for water, which gets charged back to the city as well as to the county of DuPage at certain percentages. Obviously, their percentages are more because most of the water goes through a master meter.
Right. I was just wondering about the lost cost. That's all. If we had lost costs in the unincorporated areas.
We charge that, as Dan's saying, the county pays us for an estimated unaccounted for flow, which is what
Okay,
what it's called, yeah.
just want to make sure.
I
For
have
the
one-
record, I had no idea how involved water was until I joined the city council. I welcome others to educate themselves.
You can come out with us on fire hydrants, because we're real.
I have a little tour.
your
I
paint-
picked up a
bring your
picture of a fire
paintbrush.
hydrant. Piper and I
us
came
different
across a
types
fire
of
hydrant
hydrants.
today that I think might be leaking a little bit. I got some show and tell after the meeting.
When,
I take pictures when I walk
when
by.
there's a water main break in the unincorporated areas, it's worth fixing it, yes?
Yeah, if we're responsible for the for the maintenance in that area,
Not the
yes.
surf system, I mean,
Yeah.
it depends.
Well, again, the majority of the unincorporated areas in Darien fall under Darien Public Works, Darien Water Department's responsibility for maintenance. So
All of them or
the majority of them, I would say the Hinswood area that Mayor Marquez is talking about, maybe off of Concord and a couple of those streets between Cass and Nantucket, basically do not fall under our jurisdiction. That's still under DuPage counties. But you take the areas, behind Eisenhower Junior High that are incorporated. That's all us for maintenance. So, earlier this winter, we had a water main break in the 1800 block of, the unincorporated portion of Holly. That's us to repair, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would think that if we have the responsibility of fixing whatever water main break, they should be having the same equipment, so we should be having the same meters.
Well, those portion, like in the unincorporated portion of Holly, that's under our jurisdiction. That's our water meter. That's all of our infrastructure.
Okay.
Again, the portion, there's a smaller portion of unincorporated area that falls on DuPage County's jurisdiction, and again,
Very small, very, very small percentage based on.
it's much smaller than the unincorporated areas that we
All right.
serve.
Okay, so getting back to Water Depreciation Fund, we have the revenues, transfer from the water funds, basically, and then we've got the total revenues, and then we've got a series of expenditures.
We got the drop then in year 3?
Yeah, I was just going to ask
Yes.
Brian about
Yeah.
that. Again, for the new council members,
Almost 50%.
largely the surplus, I think, that we've had in this water fund, we did a bond issue back in 2018 because we had a lot of water main projects and everything. So we issued a bond, and that came into the water fund.
Yeah, I see
and that's
that.
been partly responsible for the transfers. Now, over the next couple of years, you can see we're having significant capital outlays here. But again, in year 3, it's not showing any, but the fund balance has basically been depleted, Brian. And even the water fund at that point is down to a much lower level. Are there any anticipated future? I know you can't really anticipate, but if there's more sewer work or anything, once we get past year 3.
Not
we
sewer,
would-
you
we-
mean water main? Yeah.
Yeah, we would either have to do another bond issue or raise water rates or something in order to generate enough revenue to cover it, would be my assumption. But
Yeah,
I just want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, again, looking over a 3-year period as we do, this scenario calls for a 25, from $9.75 to $10 per thousand in the second and third year. So it does go up 25 cents per thousand, and that only gets you where you're at.
Right.
But I am hoping that with the new meters that read more accurately, this revenue projections will be better than I'm seeing now. I won't know that for another year or so, but it's just like any other revenue. Somewhere down the line, you have to look at if you're generating enough surplus in your regular water rate, and our water rate is in part per thousand and in part fixed costs. So I'll look at both of those again next year, but at this point, we're projected fine for the next few years. There are some water main projects I did not include in here. There's projects that I didn't include because of the revenue, like the hydrant painting. Dan wanted to paint the hydrants again, and I did not include it because it would necessitate a rate increase.
And those have not been included for the 3 years.
Correct. They should be zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the actual page, I noted no revenue.
Okay. Yeah, and the water fund is
What,
decreasing
Chris?
from
Oh,
about
wait.
2.4 million down to 1.4 million over those 3 years, so.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Is there any more conversation on the, and questions on the revenue and the decrease? We'll go into expenditures where there is quite a bit of backup, starting on page 221. We'll first start with Water Depreciation Fund equipment. Any questions on the equipment? Okay, moving into capital improvement infrastructure. Pretty much everything on the page has pretty much for the most part backup following.
And how effective is these automatic flushing units? And is that really gonna add?
It's twofold, but go ahead, Chris. You
Yeah,
can do that.
it definitely improves the water quality, so you're getting consistent flow. We had one that we installed a few years ago off of Juniper, right there. Yeah, off of Juniper. That was based on a water quality complaint, and we have not heard back from the resident at all. So I mean, and I think this goes into the EPA has recently changed the rules, and the requirements that were for the chlorine level that were, and so this goes into, as the backup kind of states, is, we need to ensure that we're making sure that water's moving, in these areas where we have dead ends, and that's just one of the ways that we're going to help to do that.
That's because of the lack of looping, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And again, I mean, this was this is identifying some locations. It's not all, so we're probably going to have, some more of them. Again, I don't know exactly how many. We're working as we go through things to kind of try and identify more, some potential more spots. But, unfortunately, we're stuck with, we have to, work within what the EPA gives us.
So that's why the increase is from 68,000 to 213,000 because of the additional for the equipment.
No, this is the 66,000 below that, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Tom.
Just a quick question on a truck. I noticed it only has 45,000 miles. A lot of trucks will go 500,000 to 1 million. I noticed there's a few issues, but it doesn't really seem that old at only 10 years and 45,000 miles. That's 4,500 miles per year. I know, I see there's some issues with the PTO pump, hydraulics, and this and that, but it's quite a bit for only a 10-year-old truck and 45,000 miles. I mean, semis are easily 500,000 in miles, so.
In Tom, we appreciate what you're saying. This is the Sterling. Unfortunately, Sterling went out of business. The support for it now is getting more difficult. I know it's been rated. It's at that rating of 77.8, and no one's arguing that it should last longer. This is one of our problem childs, whether we like it or not.
Can you just explain the rating for me? Because that's new to me.
Sure.
How does your rating work?
There's an actual policy, if you want to call it, and we'll forward it to you as well, whether it's tomorrow, whatever the case is. It's I don't have all the knowledge, or I should say all the criteria memorized, but I believe there's 10 or 13 criterions that basically are rated with points from 1 to 10. Currently, it's a total point system of 95, not 100, but approximately 95. Once it hits that 75 mark, the vehicle is slated for replacement. This was something that we took back to municipal services. Mayor Marquez, I think you may recall working on this as well with us back in municipal services. It's been very beneficial. It's working, and a classic example, we just tried to save a vehicle over in the police department, and unfortunately it backfired. Everything backfired on us from that perspective. So
Okay, thank you.
And do you sell the truck then? Do you trade it in? How does that work
yes, it
out?
basically goes to a public auction. The auction is declared surplus by the city council, and there's a vetted service that we currently use. They will put it online, do all the actual transactions for it with a certain fee.
Any more questions on the equipment, capital improvements, infrastructure under water depreciation? Any objections to moving on? Okay. I believe that puts us into special revenue funds, correct?
Yeah, the only thing, Mike was talking about the meters. We really didn't, because that gets out into the second year. I guess there's no need to discuss it. We're fine.
No, yeah, we're still planning for it, right, yeah. We're not sure if we're gonna get them this year or next year.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
No more discussion on the meters? Brian?
We'll come back to the council,
Okay.
after for
Okay.
formal approval.
Okay, you guys, we're 9 o'clock. Should we keep forging ahead? I believe so.
I think we're
Anyone
close
need
to
to grab
wrapping.
something? Yep.
Because the special revenue funds are,
Okay. I am looking at municipal services motor fuel tax budget, page 279. Is that the right place? Brian?
yeah, and this was the handout we handed out
Yes,
separately.
last night, or the week, last week?
Yes, and it shows the MFT allotment increasing because it actually started this fiscal year, so we're seeing an increase from what we estimated, and then a significant increase from about 550,000 to 905,000 in years out. That's where we can get to the expenses where we can save up for a few years and add that money to the street program.
I have a question there,
Yes.
Brian, and it relates back to the prior question that I asked you when we were in capital projects. I asked you if that amount, that excess amount from the MFT was going to be available every year for streets. And I can see in here.
Oh, I thought you meant is the revenue available every year, that's additional revenue.
Okay.
No, this is every 3 years we'll save up to get that million. That's how, I misunderstood your question.
Okay, yeah, so I think that's important to note. My assumption was that we would be able to take $1 million from this every year, but you can see as you get to year 3, we're generating 900,000 and spending 1.6, assuming we're at the $1 million mark, and we're basically out of that surplus. So every 3 years, basically, we'd be able to transfer that $1 million for capital projects.
Yes.
So once we do get to the end of year 3 again in capital projects, we do
Yeah,
have
you're not getting
a more
the-
serious.
Correct.
Okay.
Because there was a
Piling
question.
up.
So Mike, there was a question if that revenue was a one-time revenue. That's what I thought you were asking. That was my
I
misunderstanding.
understand now, yeah, I was just
Yeah.
trying to relate the numbers there.
Yep.
just to make
And these are all expenses that are only permitted with the state, and Dan comes back to the council with a resolution, he has to send to IDOT, so I don't really have much more on that.
There's backup to the motor fuel tax budget on pages 280 and 281. Are there any questions on this budget? Okay. That being said, if there's no objection, I'm going to move on to special service area number 1, fund budget, page 282.
This is a special service area that is for the Terre Hill area to maintain their, basically their wetlands and drainage areas. And we have a pretty good program there. Every once in a while, we'll have unknown expenses come up. We had a period where the beavers were causing havoc over there, and it was pretty expensive and some other things. So if we find that we have a surplus larger than we need over the next couple of years, we could always abate those taxes also, but at this point, we estimate that we'll use that money.
Any questions on special service area number 1, fund budget? Okay, if there's no objections, I'll wrap that one up. I think we've covered all the special funds. Okay. I do think we have an outstanding issue still from our conversations earlier, not today, but prior meetings about painting the tower.
Yeah, I left that in for now, and the council wanted to save that for the end to talk about and see if you want to include it in the budget or what you want to do with that.
I'm
Any
just wondering
conversation?
I'm just wondering if we should even look at it for this year, because there's, Tom brought it up that I think we're chasing good money after bad, and there's too many issues with that area that.
I think that would give us some more time to look into it, because there were some technical questions we certainly couldn't answer. We could,
Find out what the projected
Like,
lifespan would
value
be
is.
with
Yeah.
it and without it. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing we haven't been able to determine yet.
so, I mean, we can find, we could still find that out, but do you want it to move to the
I'm
second?
just asking if, well, I'll ask, is there a consensus to take that out of the budget for fiscal year '21? Can I have a raise of hands? Okay, so it looks like we're taking it out.
Okay.
You guys can investigate away and bring it back to us in the future.
Yeah, we'll come back. We already went out to bid. We'll come back to city council to reject all bids, as we did with the
Okay.
Darien Historical Society.
So as
and
a placeholder, I'll put it in the second year, and then we'll
Okay.
come back with info.
Okay. I believe I was brought to my attention that there was another
Yeah, just one
potential ad, the Chicago Metro Mayoral Caucus.
Yes, there was one item I had originally taken out, and I've talked to Mayor Marquez more about that, and he sees us being more involved in an organization. I think this last weekend was an example. It's obviously a very good organization. It's a little broader than mayors and managers, and it's about $975 for the annual membership dues. So,
Is there
so I
any
was
objection to that?
looking to put that back in.
No objection to that? No. It was under 1,000, 978
Yeah.
change. Okay, so we have a consensus to do that. Great. Is there anything else you would like to highlight on before we wrap tonight's meeting?
No,
and
I'll
our
just,
budget discussions?
I'll put a recap together of whatever changes since the draft budget went out to where we're at now, and those changes are either corrections I might have found along the way or changes the council made. Mike asked me a number of questions about salaries and benefits. We always fine tune those now because, again, we're a month and a half farther out than when I prepared the drafts. So we'll put something back out to the council.
So, for the sake of our gentleman who works the cameras, he wanted to know if tonight was our last night. And it looks like we've finished.
As far as I'm concerned, this is it, yes.
We will have no meeting next week.
So the meeting that's published for Tuesday, March 10th, as needed, will not be happening. But we are still forging ahead with the original date of April 6th as being the public hearing for the budget.
Yeah, the final budget we put together looks different than the draft. It has some more information in that, and we'll put that together. We get that to the council. It's in the schedule, but it's usually a week before that
And that will
public
be
hearing.
published at the same time when the council gets it, published on the website, or just published with the meeting information
Well,
for April 6th?
it's a public hearing on the budget, so that gets published in the local, I forget, newspaper that we publish now, and then we'll put it out on all our social media also.
Okay.
When
So,
we do it on social media, when we saw the original proposal from Metro Strategies, they showed how, was it Wilmette actually did a flyer, or they did an informational bulletin on their budget and where monies go, and the residents were able to get that. Could we do something similar to that? So
Well, I think the timing is such that it might fall within our quarterly already, and I think that would be maybe
I think
one
that
of
was
the,
done after the budget was approved.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for.
yeah, so I think the timing, we're starting to move ahead now with the schedule for the newsletter. So I think the timing is such that we could put something nice out in that edition.
Any other comments, questions, conversations?
Very
Comments?
excellent job.
Oh,
Excellent
thank
job.
you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Just one quick comment. There is a guy behind the scenes, I think his name is Joe, I don't even know his last name, that's been doing the filming. I think he filmed 2 out of our 3 meetings here. It does save the city several $100s by him volunteering to do that. So, Joe, thanks for doing that.
Bravo, Joe, bravo.
And this is for Joe, go Cardinals, because he loves the Cardinals.
Oh, I have a son that loves the
not
Cardinals.
going that
And have
far.
some snacks, Joe. Those are compliments of me. I'd like to thank everybody for participating, thank the community for watching, and I will adjourn our budget workshops at 9:08. Okay.
Nice going.